Chapter 836. The room was very quiet. Su Peijian lowered her head so that no one could see her expression. Su Qinghui was afraid that Su Peijian wouldn't agree, so he told her about a project he was working on. Or you can join as a participant. If you're willing, I'll send you the information when I get back. What do you think? We'll see. Su Qinghui was a little disappointed that Su Peijian didn't agree right away, but he wasn't in a hurry. The waiter began to serve the dishes, and the father and daughter ate quietly. From time to time, Su Qinghui would put food into Su Peijian's bowl and talk about what had happened in Lin City recently. Of course, those things had nothing to do with the Li family. Su Peijian was only responsible for listening, not speaking. Su Qinghui put down his chopsticks and poured a cup of tea for Su Peijian. Are you sure you won't consider helping me? No. Su Peijian picked up the teacup and felt the warmth in her palm. Dad, I have something to do now. Although the 2 department stores are small, they are just right for me. As for the rest, let's talk about it later. Su Qinghui was silent for a while, then poured himself another cup of tea. He looked up at Su Peijian and said gently, Peijian. I know you might not believe me when I say this. But I'm serious. Your talent should not be buried. Su Peijian finished the tea in her cup and put it down. She looked at Su Qinghui. There was really no need. I am doing very well now. I know that I'm no longer the Su family's eldest daughter. I wasn't thinking about going back either. Whether it's you or my mother, you don't have to feel guilty. What I've lost. If I really want it, I will get it back little by little through my own efforts. I don't need your pity. How is it pity? Su Qinghui was shocked by Su Peijian's words. You are my daughter. I know what's best for you. I'm like all the fathers in the world. I want the best for my daughter. Peijian, don't think that I don't care about you anymore. Impossible. No matter when, you will always be my daughter. Always. Su Peijian's head was still lowered, but the expression on her face had changed a little. She looked up at Su Qinghui. They had been father and daughter for many years. Su Qinghui's words were true. She knew. Thanks, Dad. You're my daughter. Why are you thanking me? Su Qinghui was very kind and serious. Su Qinghui erased the mistakes he made on impulse when he was young. In some ways, he was a qualified father. Su Peijian knew. I have a lot of businesses in Rome City, and I meant what I said just now. It's okay if you don't want to take over. If you have other ideas, you can tell me at any time. Daddy will always support you. All right. Su Peijian's eyes were a little sore. She lowered her head and suppressed those emotions. After leaving the plum garden and saying goodbye to Su Qinghui, Su Peijian didn't go home immediately. Instead, she went to the company to take a look. The Lantern Festival had just passed, and people were still immersed in the festive atmosphere of the new year. The company's activities were very grand. Whether it was online or offline, business was good. After reading the report, Su Peijian sat in her office, feeling a little bored. It was not difficult for her to manage all of this. Thinking of Su Qinghui's words, she knew that he was telling the truth. Compared to Xiang Kaiping, Su Qinghui was undoubtedly more aware of her ambition. However, that kind of ambition was only in the past. Now, she had lost that ambition. Realizing that she was feeling sad in the office, Su Peijian shook her head. Chicken soup really didn't suit her. When she returned to Rome Garden, Su Peijian found that Ling Jing was not there. She frowned slightly and looked at Xiao Zhao, who was preparing dinner in the kitchen. Where is he? She didn't say who, but she believed that Xiao Zhao would understand. You mean Mr. Ling? He left. When they were arguing, Xiao Zhao was cleaning up in the kitchen and didn't hear it. Mr. Ling left not long after you left. After saying this, Xiao Zhao carefully looked at Su Peijian's face. He seemed very angry when he left. Angry? What was there to be angry about? Su Peijian didn't take Ling Jing's anger to heart. It was nothing more than anger that she didn't accompany him. At most, she would accompany him for another day tomorrow. However, Su Peijian didn't expect that Ling Jing didn't come back that day. Not only did he not come back, but he also didn't come back the next day. Su Peijian, who hadn't seen Ling Jing in Rong City for 2 days in a row, seriously thought about the conflict between them that day. It was true that she broke her promise, but wasn't Ling Jing taking her too seriously? Since he had such a bad temper, she would leave him alone for a few days. Su Peijian didn't take it to heart at all. She didn't even call or send Ling Jing a message. In the blink of an eye, she returned to the villa where Xiang Kaiping lived. She didn't come back for 2 days, and Xiang Kaiping was very happy to see her back. Xiang Kaiping didn't dare to control her daughter at all. It wasn't that she didn't want her daughter to come back to accompany her, but she didn't want her daughter to be unhappy. She was very happy that Su Peijian came back, but she would wait if Su Peijian didn't come back. As a mother, she couldn't do anything about it. Su Peijian was a smart person and had seen all kinds of people. She could completely see Xiang Caiping's subtle feelings, which were between compensation and guilt. She could see it, but she couldn't understand it. She really didn't understand why people were always obsessed with the past. According to the current average life expectancy, Xiang Kaiping could live for at least 20 or 30 years. If she continued to be so stubborn, Su Peijian couldn't do anything about it. While living in the villa, Su Peijian still woke up early every day, but the result of waking up early here was that she could go outside to exercise. Rong City was actually still very cold in the first month. Early in the morning, Su Peijian changed into a set of thick white sportswear and went out for a run. It was still very cold outside. She didn't run slowly, but she didn't run fast either. There was really nothing to see in the early spring neighborhood. Even though their neighborhood was considered a villa area, they had put in a lot of effort to plant some greenery. However, compared to the beauty of Lin City, it still seemed simple and boring. After running 1 lap, the sun slowly rose. She was about to go home when she saw the golden retriever again. The golden retriever saw her inexplicably excited and rushed toward her. Su Peijian stopped and stood there motionlessly. The golden retriever, however, pounced on her without any hesitation. Just as it was about to pounce on Su Peijian, the dog leash around its neck was held by someone. It didn't succeed in pouncing on Su Peijian, so it barked there with some dissatisfaction. Dian Dian. A gentle male voice sounded. Lin Feixing walked around from behind the trees. When he saw Su Peijian, he nodded at her and said, "Miss Su." He was also wearing sportswear, and it was very coincidental. He was wearing white. However, Su Peijian ignored him. "Yes." Su Peijian responded as a greeting. She passed by Lin Feixing and wanted to leave, but he grabbed her hand at that moment. "Miss Su? What's the matter?" Su Peijian subconsciously frowned when she saw his hand grabbing her. Lin Feixing seemed to have reacted and quickly let go of her hand. "Sorry." He was a little uncomfortable, but seeing Su Peijian's cold expression, he couldn't help but say, "Miss Su, I've thought about what you said the other day." "The other day? Which day?" Su Peijian took some time to remember which day he was referring to. She didn't speak and just stared at Lin Feixing. His face, which was full of elitism, actually looked a little perturbed at that moment. "Miss Su, I think that everyone has a past. It's not a big deal. Your past is the past, and your present is the present. I don't want your past, I only want your present and future." Su Peijian was stunned for a moment. The golden retriever by her feet was still rubbing against her pants, and she was dazed for a moment. "Mr. Lin, you can call me Feixing." Lin Feixing seemed to have finally mustered up the courage to finish what he wanted to say. In the end, he felt a little embarrassed. "I admit that I was a little conflicted at first. But I don't have the right to criticize you. I've had girlfriends abroad. We broke up because we didn't get along. Although I met someone suitable later and spent time with two of them. Later, because I had to return to China, I didn't do anything about it. I think that the reason why we broke up so easily is that those feelings weren't deep. When you told me that day, I was really surprised. But these few days, I've been thinking about you. Peijian, can I call you Peijian? Lin Feixing's eyes were filled with hidden passion. Su Peijian didn't know what to say. The golden retriever seemed to have infected its owner's emotions. It barked a few times and barked even more happily. Peijian. I'm not a child. I believe that you're not either. Mature men and women naturally have their own ways to solve problems and deal with them. So I want to ask, can you give me a chance? Su Peijian didn't rush to answer. The Lin Feixing in front of her was undoubtedly a very good marriage partner. He had good qualities and a good appearance. Most importantly, he didn't mind her past. She thought that she had a good eye for people. When Lin Feixing spoke to her, his eyes were open. She could tell that what he said was true. He really didn't mind. Looking down at the golden retriever that was playing around her feet, she frowned slightly. Even though I've been in prison? Yes. Lin Feixing nodded. Prison is your punishment. No matter what you've done, since you've been punished, it's in the past. Su Peijian didn't speak. That was the truth. Life in prison was God's punishment for her. She had already accepted the result, so she didn't feel that she had anything to regret. However, she was really surprised that Lin Feixing could say something like that. For a moment, she didn't know what answer to give him. You don't have to rush to give an answer. Lin Feixing saw that she didn't speak for a long time and was afraid that she would be too conflicted. He quickly gave her a way out. I can wait for you. Really? Su Peijian blinked and looked up. She met the passion in Lin Feixing's eyes and was a little confused. You like me? The man standing in front of her actually blushed. Su Peijian didn't want his answer. She looked at him and took a step forward. What do you like about me? Just this appearance? Just her face? She had once read a saying that all love at first sight was just a result of the appearance. Although she wasn't in a state of panic, she really didn't have more energy to manage a relationship. You might think that I'm exaggerating when I say love at first sight. But some things are just like that. Love doesn't start. If everything about love could be explained, how could there be so many infatuated men and women in this world? What he said made sense. Su Peijian nodded. Mr. Lin, I can't give you an answer now. Can you think about it later? Is that okay? Of course. Lin Feixing smiled. Seeing that Su Peijian was about to leave, he stopped her again and took out his phone at the same time. Peijian. Although you need time to think about it, can you add me as a friend first? Su Peijian saw the uneasiness in his eyes. In the end, she didn't reject him. It was just one more friend. She didn't have any burdens. Back at the villa, during dinner, Xiang Kaiping looked at Su Peijian with a hesitant expression. Mom, what's the matter? No. Xiang Kaiping quickly shook her head. Just now, I think I saw Lin Feixing looking for you upstairs. He also came to our house last time. He came twice. Peijian, you. He came twice? Su Peijian didn't hear Xiang Kaiping mention it. Hearing it now, she wasn't surprised. Yes, he was looking for me just now. He said that he doesn't mind what happened to me. Really? He came to my house once before and said that. That's what he meant. There was a hint of anticipation in Xiang Caiping's voice. Peijian, you said it yourself before. You said that if Lin Feixing doesn't mind your past, you'll give him a chance. It wasn't that she was impatient, but Xiang Kaiping really didn't want to lose such a good son-in-law. I remember. I've already given him my contact information. As for the future, we'll talk about it later. Okay, that's good. That's good. It was best to have contact information. Xiang Caiping's face was full of anticipation. She was afraid that Su Peijian would miss out on a good marriage. Su Peijian couldn't understand this kind of thinking. She didn't want to continue this topic. After dinner, she went to work. Although Su Peijian didn't want to take on Su Qinghui's business in Rong City, when he sent her the information, she still read it carefully. She had to admit that at Su Qinghui's age, he had experience, and foresight. This project was indeed good. Su Peijian was indeed interested. However, if she only took care of Su Qinghui's business, it would be lacking something. She happened to have a sum of money on hand. If she participated as a shareholder, it would be a good choice. Su Peijian calculated the money she had left after deducting the house she bought last time. She called Su Qinghui. She asked in detail about the operation. In the end, she mentioned the funds and the people. She was part of the bargaining chip. Su Qinghui understood that. Su Qinghui couldn't be happier that his daughter was willing to take on the company. He immediately set up some details with Su Peijian. He also talked to a third-party partner and introduced Su Peijian's identity. In this way, Su Peijian was busy again. After she was busy for a week. It was already 10 days later when she finished all the information and the previous procedures. The first month of the lunar calendar was almost over, and she hadn't seen Ling Jing for almost half a month. When Su Peijian got off work one day, she suddenly remembered that her emotions had been quite tense recently. She needed to relax. As for how to relax, was there anything more relaxing than the balance of yin and yang? She called Ling Jing, but Ling Jing didn't answer. Su Peijian frowned. She really didn't know that the pretty boy she raised could be so angry. She originally didn't want to pay attention to it, but she more or less broke her promise that day. It was rare. Su Peijian patiently called Ling Jing for a second time. Chapter 837. The crystal lights hanging above the high living room were shining brightly, and there were 2 rows of bodyguards on both sides of the hall. The group of people didn't dare to breathe too loudly. Gu Xiu stood next to Ling Jing, his head half hanging, and he seemed very embarrassed. Ling Jing sat on the sofa quite leisurely, his right index finger tapping his knee unconsciously. Under the sofa, there were 2 men who were detained there, kneeling on the ground. One of them was bleeding from his shoulder, and the other was bleeding from his leg. The blood dyed the carpet in the living room red. The 2 men didn't dare to make any big movements, and their bodies kept shaking. Looking at the blood, Ling Jing stopped tapping his knee. "You've got guts. Coming here to kill me?" Ling Jing finally spoke. As soon as he spoke, the 2 men kneeling on the ground trembled even more. "Using such a stupid way to do it? You'd better not tell me who your master is. Really. It's too embarrassing." The 2 men seemed to be angry, but more than that, they were afraid. Vaguely, they were nervous with a sigh of relief. "Gu Xiu." Ling Jing didn't look at the 2 men. His hand began to tap his knee again. "Young master." Gu Xiu took a step forward and bowed. The 2 crocodiles in the backyard pond probably haven't smelled human for a long time. "Throw them in." "Young master." Gu Xiu was stunned for a moment. When did they raise crocodiles in their backyard? "Young Master Ling, please spare us." The 2 men suddenly became terrified, and one of them kept kowtowing. Young Master Ling, please spare us." 4th young master asked us to come. "Young Master Ling, it really has nothing to do with us." Young Master Ling Jing didn't have the patience to listen anymore. He waved his hand and asked someone to drag the 2 men away. The sound of begging was endless. The blood that the 2 men had shed stained the living room all the way. Ling Jing frowned and motioned for someone to come and clean it up. Soon, someone came to clean it up. Ling Jing sat still for a long time before looking at the slender figure who had been staying in the corner of the living room. If one didn't pay attention, one would almost ignore it. The person's body had begun to tremble, especially when Ling Jing glanced at her. Her whole body was shaking like a fallen leaf in the wind. Ling Jing hooked her finger, and someone immediately carried the man over. The young woman's body collapsed in front of Ling Jing. Ling Jing lowered his head to look at her. Tisk, scared to this extent? What a coward. Su Peijian's face flashed across his mind. If that woman was here, how would she react? Shen Lefyu knelt there. She had seen everything that had happened just now, and she was terrified. Seeing Ling Jing's hand reaching over, she tried her best not to scream, but her body kept trying to step back. Unfortunately, there was nowhere for him to go. Ling Jing pinched her chin and looked at the pitiful face with tears in her eyes. Afraid? Shen Lefyu couldn't even make a sound. She just trembled and looked at Ling Jing as if she was looking at a demon. Your brother is just like them now. My brother? Shen Lefyu's face turned pale. Where is my brother? Can you let him go? I beg you, let him go. If you want to see your brother, it's very simple. It's very simple if you want to save your brother. This matter depends on what you do. Shen Lefyu blinked when she met Ling Jing's gloomy eyes. When Ling Jing retracted his hand, she seemed to have suddenly understood. She suddenly became bold and reached out to hug Ling Jing's neck. She raised her head and was about to move closer to his lips. Ling Jing looked at Shen Lefyu's face that was getting closer and closer. She was crying like a pear blossom in the rain, looking very pitiful. Unexpectedly, he didn't push her away. Seeing her lips getting closer and closer, his phone rang at this moment. It was an unfamiliar ringtone. He hadn't used that phone for a long time. He glanced at the coffee table. At this time, the only person who would call him was that woman. Damn that woman, she hadn't called him for so many days. Now she knew to contact him? He ignored her. He looked at Shen Lefyu, who was stunned and didn't know what to do. The evil in his heart expanded infinitely at this moment. He pulled Shen Lefyu's body up and held her on his lap. He lowered his head and was about to kiss her. When he saw her lips, which weren't considered full and were a little pale, his mind couldn't help but think of Su Peijian's lips. Delicate, bright red, plump, seductive. He tilted his head and kissed Shen Lefyu's cheek. Her skin was not bad. Naturally, the skin of a young girl wasn't bad either. However, compared to Su Peijian, it was a little less delicate. Her skin, nourished by expensive skincare products, was as smooth as jade. The phone had stopped ringing at this time. He stepped back a little and looked at the phone with his eyes half closed. Damn that woman. Was there so little patience? She wouldn't call again after one call? The anger just now was spreading even more. The evil seemed to be unable to be suppressed anymore. He got up and grabbed Shen Lefyu to go upstairs to the room. Shen Lefyu's body trembled. She had clearly made up her mind, but she was still afraid. Ling Jing had only taken 3 steps when his phone rang again. He stopped in his tracks. He turned around and stared at the screen of the phone for a long time. His slightly narrowed eyes were a little fierce. He was still holding Shen Lefyu with one hand. She was dragged a few steps, but because he suddenly stopped, she bumped into his back. Ling Jing didn't have much patience. He turned around and glared at Shen Lefyu. His eyes were sharp as if he wanted to kill her. Get lost. Shen Lefyu's body trembled even more violently. It was as if she completely didn't understand why the man who looked kind just now was so gloomy. Ling Jing didn't care about her. His eyes fell on the phone. After watching the phone ring 1, 2, 3 times, he finally reached out and picked up the phone. On the other end of the phone, Su Peijian was about to hang up. She suddenly picked up the phone and was stunned. There was no sound on the other end of the phone. She glanced at the phone that showed that it was in a call. Ling Jing? She was clearly just calling his name. Ling Jing actually felt that the evil fire from just now had flared up again. If you have something to say, say it. His tone was a little angry. He was so angry that even he was surprised. Didn't you ignore me for half a month? Why are you still calling me? When Ling Jing said this tone, it felt like a wind in the living room. Gu Xiao and the bodyguard standing at the side wanted to bury their heads in the ground. He glanced at them coldly, and they quickly left. Before leaving, the two bodyguards didn't forget to go forward and take Shen Lefyu, who was half lying on the ground, away. Su Peijian only heard some rustling sounds on the other end of the phone. She didn't think much about it. Her attention was on what Ling Jing said. Thinking of how she broke her promise that day, she felt a little guilty. I'm sorry, I had something urgent that day, so I left first. I'll make it up to you next time. With Su Peijian's personality, this was a rare apology. After all, she was still educated since she was young. If she was in the wrong, she was in the wrong. If she broke her promise, she broke her promise. How do you want to make it up to me? Ling Jing could only be thankful that there was no one in the living room. Otherwise, if people saw him like a different person, their eyeballs would probably fall out of their sockets. How do you want to make it up to me? For Su Peijian, it was nothing more than money. From her understanding, Ling Jing was a little gangster. What else could he have other than money? I want you to accompany me for 3 days. Ling Jing thought for a moment and added, I want to go to the hot spring. You come with me. The Ling family had a very famous hot spring club. He happened to be going there to inspect the property in the next few days. Just in time. No. Su Peijian was very busy now. How could she have the time? Then what else are you talking about? Ling Jing's temper rose. You untrustworthy woman. After Ling Jing finished speaking, he hung up the phone. After hanging up, he still felt that it wasn't enough. He picked up the phone and was about to smash it. Damn woman, he would see how he would deal with her later. The phone rang again. It was still Su Peijian. Ling Jing pressed it. He was the dignified young Master Ling. A woman like Su Peijian couldn't play with him whenever she wanted. This time, the phone rang a few times before hanging up again. Ling Jing felt that he couldn't suppress his evil fire anymore. He planned to go to Shen Lefyu. Whether she was as beautiful as Su Peijian or not, she was at least a woman. The phone rang again. This time, it was a text message. There was only one sentence on it. If 3 days won't do, 2 days will do. After sending that message, Su Peijian didn't call again. It was okay for a pet to throw a tantrum occasionally. But if it was really too much, she wouldn't lower herself. She calmly went to take a shower and tidied herself up. After looking at the report and the previous plan again, she finally went back to her room to sleep. Before going to sleep, she glanced at her phone. There were no text messages or calls. Su Peijian put down her phone and went to sleep alone. While she was half asleep, she felt as if something was pressing on her. She opened her eyes and found that Ling Jing had come back. Not only did he come back, but he had also taken a shower. His body was still damp, and there was naturally a bit of coldness in the dampness. She pushed him with some dissatisfaction. Get up, it's cold. Don't worry, it won't be cold soon. Ling Jing lowered his head and kissed her lips. His actions were rude and forceful. He was used to this, so Su Peijian didn't find it strange. It was just that today, he seemed to be a little more eager than before. What she didn't know was that after she sent those command-like words, Ling Jing almost dropped his phone. His intention was to strangle this damn woman to death. At least he had to teach her a lesson. But who was he? He was Ling Jing, the young master of the Ling family. It was easy to ignore this woman, and it was easy to take revenge on her. But it was not easy to conquer her. If he could make her fall in love with him and then abandon her, Ling Jing felt his blood boil as soon as he thought about it. He really couldn't wait to see the look on this woman's face when she went crazy for him. The body was the first step, and the heart was the second. For the final goal, so what if he took a step back? After all, the real winner would be the one who had the last laugh. So he came again. Although he came, the fire in his heart didn't dissipate easily. He hugged Su-Peision hard, rough, and barbaric, with absolute masculinity. It was a little painful, a little numb, and some other things. Su-Peision half closed her eyes and stepped back uncomfortably. Ling Jing was really a beast in bed. Her slender waist was held tightly in his palm, and her body was twisted into all kinds of angles. She realized one thing in that twisted state. Ling Jing couldn't be in a bad mood, could he? When Su-Peision sat in the Cadillac, she only looked at the road outside and then closed her eyes again. She got up very early. However, as soon as she had breakfast, she was caught by Ling Jing and taken out of the house. She didn't know why Ling Jing was crazy last night, but he kept torturing her. Even now, her waist was still hurting. She wasn't interested in asking where Ling Jing was taking her, so she closed her eyes to rest. When the car stopped in front of an antique building, Su-Peision just woke up. She turned around and looked at Ling Jing. He was looking at her. "You're awake?" "Just in time. Let's get out." Her feet were a little weak, but after sleeping in the car for a while, she felt much better. She looked at the time. They had been driving for about an hour and a half. She stopped and looked ahead. The building in front of her was antique and very charming. Su-Peision was a little surprised to see such green tiles and white walls in a place like Rome City. "Let's go." Su-Peision wasn't in a hurry to enter the door. She looked at Ling Jing and said, "Such a place should be a membership system, right?" Ling Jing was stunned for a moment. At that time, he only thought that coming here to play could make Su-Peision fall in love with him after relaxing. He had completely forgotten about this. "It's a membership system. However, I have a membership card." His expression seemed a little uncomfortable. "Let's go." Su-Peision stood still. "Your membership card wasn't given to you by your last sugar daddy, was it?" There was a flash of anger in Ling Jing's eyes, but only for a moment. He gently shook his hair, took a step forward, and looked at Su-Peision. "What? If I say yes, will you not go in?" Su-Peision didn't answer and glanced at him. As soon as they entered the door, a waiter came over. When he saw Ling Jing, there was a flash of surprise in his eyes. Su-Peision wasn't surprised. Since Ling Jing came with the card of a former sugar daddy, it wasn't surprising that the other party knew him. "Hello, madam. Do you have a membership card? Do you have an appointment?" When the waiter met Ling Jing's eyes, he automatically swallowed the latter greeting and stepped forward respectfully to look at Su-Peision. It was Su-Peision's style to be straightforward. She took out a card from her bag and handed it to the waiter. "I don't have a membership card. Can I get one now? Is that okay?" "Of course. But madam, what level do you want to get? Our different levels have different fees, and the services you can enjoy are also different. The highest level." "Okay, madam. The annual fee here is 1 million yuan a year. The intermediate fee is 2 million. The supreme membership fee is 3 million a year. Are you sure you want to get a supreme membership?" "Yes." Su-Peision didn't dwell on these small things. After getting the membership, she turned to look at Ling Jing and put the card in her hand. "If you want to come next time, use mine." "What is this?" Ling Jing held the card and stared at Su-Peision's phoenix eyes. "You can calculate whatever you want. I just don't like it when you use other women's things to please me." That made her feel disgusted. Chapter 838. Su-Peision's reaction was to raise her eyebrows and not look at him at all. Jealous? Would she be jealous of him? Was it necessary for her to be jealous of a man she could buy with money? "Let's go." The membership fee was high for a reason. The environment here was really good. Most importantly, the supporting facilities were quite complete. In addition to the special spa, hot spring, there were also health centers and entertainment centers. Su Peijian came here after breakfast in the morning. She was taken to a special room, which was divided into its own little world. She was very tired yesterday. It was good to come here at this time to relax. She felt a touch of warmth in her palm. She looked down and found that Ling Jing, who was following her, was holding her hand. She wanted to break free, but he held it very tightly. "I've been here before. How about I introduce you to it?" Su Peijian stared at him and wanted to withdraw her hand from his palm, but he held it so tightly that she couldn't break free. She glared at him and simply let him be. No one here knew her, and she didn't care much about her current reputation. The garden was very large, and the scenery was worthy of the membership fee. There were pavilions, rockery, ponds, and winding corridors. The two of them held hands and finally went to the guest room. It turned out to be a small separate courtyard. The courtyard was paved with bluestone, and the guest room was inside. The antique room was the living room outside, and the room was directly inside. There was a traditional Chinese carved mahogany bed against the wall, and a round wooden window in front of it. The scenery was really good. Living in such a room made people feel as if they had gone back to the past. Su Peijian walked to the window and looked at the small pond and rockery outside. "The environment here is good, right?" Su Peijian turned around and her eyes fell on Ling Jing's face. "You haven't slept in this bed with your former sugar daddy, have you?" "Of course not." Ling Jing put his arm around her waist. "Although it's not my first time coming to this club, it is indeed my first time here. And I've only been here with you." Su Peijian's face was indifferent, and it was obvious that she didn't believe it. "I'm telling the truth. When I came here before, the hot spring had just opened, and this place hadn't been built yet." Su Peijian didn't speak, and Ling Jing bit her cheek angrily. "You don't believe me? To believe or not to believe? What was the difference? He had other women, and she had other men. There was nothing to say. This bed is very sturdy. Do you want to try it?" Ling Jing hugged her waist, hinting at her. Su Peijian looked at him coldly. "I'm hungry." "I'm hungry too." Ling Jing's hands started to get naughty, and Su Peijian slapped them away. "I'm serious." He was also serious. However, Ling Jing thought of what she did last night and raised her eyebrows. "Okay, then let's go eat first." The cafeteria of the club was next to the guest room. There was a huge Chinese restaurant on the first floor, and the private rooms were on the second floor. There was an open-air pavilion at the back, with a layer of muslin circling the edge. It looked very artistic. You could walk through the corridor and go to the water pavilion to eat. However, it was too cold now, and Ling Jing's suggestion was rejected by Su Peijian. The wind was too strong and the temperature outside was too low. She was not interested. Today, Ling Jing was rarely talkative and went to the second floor with her. The dining table was near the window. From here, one could see most of the scenery in the garden. Looking carefully, it was really not worse than the Jiangnan garden that she had been to before. A cup of tea appeared in front of her, and Su Peijian glanced at Ling Jing. Today, Ling Jing was undoubtedly very attentive. This kind of attentiveness made her a little unaccustomed. Once upon a time, she had no lack of such attentive people around her. At that time, Su Peijian had many such attentive people around her. Those people all had their own motives. In this regard, Ling Jing was more direct than those people. It was a straightforward ambition to curry favor with a financial backer. The dishes here are very good. There are chefs from the 8 major cuisines who can cook. Among them, there are 2 chefs whose ancestors were royal chefs. As they spoke, the waiter had already begun to serve the dishes. The dishes were served with high-quality bone china. The quality was extremely beautiful, and each portion was not much. But they all looked and smelled good. "I specially ordered this stewed black chicken with monkey head mushroom for you. This soup is very good for women. Ling Jing waved the waiter away, and he personally filled a bowl of soup for Su Peijian and put it in front of her. This cherry pork is said to be Cixi favorite dish. Try it. Su Peijian looked at Ling Jing attentively serving her food, and she was in a trance for a moment. It was indeed a long time. She hadn't seen this kind of simple flattery for a long time. Xiang Kaiping was very good to her, but that kind of kindness was mother-daughter love, and there was also some guilt and compensation. She actually didn't like the flattering look in Xiang Caiping's eyes every time. She was an elder, and her flattery always made her feel pressure. Ling Jing's flattery was different. It was very simple, and this kind of flattery would make her feel no burden. Thank you. It was rare for Su Peijian to thank Ling Jing. Ling Jing smiled. There was a flash of pride in his eyes. When he, young Master Ling, wanted to flatter someone, wasn't it a matter of minutes? The dishes were indeed good. Su Peijian was in such a beautiful scene, tasting the delicious food, and her mood was indeed much better. After dinner, the two of them went back to the room to take a nap. Su Peijian thought that Ling Jing would mess around. Unexpectedly, he didn't. He actually simply hugged her to sleep. Su Peijian felt a little strange, but she really let herself fall asleep. When she woke up, it was already evening. The room was already dark, and Ling Jing was no longer by her side. She got up and found that she had slept so deeply during the day for the first time. Just as she left the room, Ling Jing came in. Seeing that she was awake, there was a hint of a smile in his eyes. You're awake? Just in time, let's go to the hot spring. We'll eat later. How about it? Su Peijian didn't refuse. Last night, Ling Jing tossed her around too much, and her body was indeed a little uncomfortable. The hot spring was at the other end of the guest room, and the two of them walked along the way as if it were a walk. Ling Jing was still holding her hand, and Su Peijian didn't try to pull her hand out this time. The environment was good, and the mood was good. The hot spring was also Chinese. The large private room was steaming because of the hot spring. Changing into a swimsuit and soaking in the pool made people feel comfortable all over. Su Peijian felt comfortable and closed her eyes. Suddenly, a hand appeared on her waist. Ling Jing placed his chin on her neck. How about this hot spring? As he spoke, he wrapped his hand around her waist. Do you want me to make you more comfortable? Su Peijian frowned, but Ling Jing began to massage her shoulders. She turned around and glanced at him. Ling Jing's long and narrow eyes were filled with smiles. The room was filled with Chinese palace lanterns. The light was dim and yellow, and people looked a little hazy in the water vapor. The man's appearance was seductive. At this moment, when he smiled, Su Peijian actually felt a little thirsty. Ling Jing's hand exerted force on her shoulder. It was neither light nor heavy, and the strength was just right. Su Peijian withdrew her gaze and felt her body slowly relax under his massage. Something began to spread with the movement of Ling Jing's hand. It was so subtle that it was hard to notice. Is it comfortable? The man's lips brushed past her neck, and she subconsciously shrank her neck. The hand on her back moved to her waist, and the man's palm was extremely hot. She suddenly felt as if there was a fire burning where he had touched. She didn't know if it was the temperature of the hot spring or the temperature of his palm. How is this strength? Ling Jing's lips pressed against her again, and it seemed to touch her earlobe. Su Peijian didn't respond for the first time, and her body moved forward. However, the direction of the hand on her waist changed from rubbing to hugging. He held her in his arms, and his embrace was very firm. Not comfortable? Ling Jing, let go of me. No. The man lowered his voice, and it sounded a little strange and sexy. Such a beautiful scene shouldn't exist in vain. Isn't it? The warm lips fell on her neck. Unlike the storm last night, it was extremely light and gentle. The touch was like an electric current, and as the man's lips fell, it spread to every part of her body. Not only were the lips very hot, but the man's hand was also very hot. With electricity, it went from the surface of the water to the bottom of the water. Her body was turned around, and the man sat on the steps in the pool. He scooped up half of her body and put it down. The spring was undoubtedly convenient for the man. This was the first time Su-Peision had such a scene, such a position. Accompanied by a sense of confusion that she had never felt before, Su-Peision gradually lost her mind. Her gaze fell on the man's seductive face under the dim yellow light. She narrowed her eyes slightly, reached out to hold his face, and for the first time, took the initiative to kiss his lips. That was the best stimulation. At this point, the man's attack began to change rhythm. The sound of the water turned from soft to loud, and the temperature from low to high, almost boiling. There were many places for entertainment in the clubhouse. Soak in the hot spring, go to the spa for physical therapy. There was also a sports hall in another area of the clubhouse. There was an indoor golf course, tennis court, and gym. Everything else was fine, but Su-Peision had always been good at tennis. Su Chenghui and Li Qianxue were both very good at tennis. Surprisingly, Ling Jing was also very good at tennis. With a skillful swing of her hand, the ball flew in Ling Jing's direction. Ling Jing caught her ball perfectly and returned it. Su-Peision thought that she was good at sports. She usually had good stamina, but after being tortured by this guy in the hot spring yesterday, her waist was a little sore. Slowly, she felt a little weak. She didn't catch Ling Jing's counterattack. She waved her hand and walked to the rest area to rest. She glanced at the filico on the rest table. Su-Peision blinked her eyes. It was indeed worth the millions of annual membership fee. Your skills are good. But your stamina is too poor. Ling Jing followed her over with a smile in his eyes. He had been smiling more in the past 2 days. Su-Peision glanced at him and looked away. When the man smiled, the corners of his eyes were raised, and there seemed to be stars in his eyes. It added a bit of a devilish temperament. Men can sometimes mislead people. You have to exercise more next time. Ling Jing's words made Su-Peision finally look at him. If you hadn't gone too far last night, I wouldn't have lost to you today. You are really confident in yourself. Ling Jing held his chin with one hand and raised his eyebrows to look at the pride on Su-Peision's face. I don't think I went too far last night. After all, you were so enthusiastic. I can only return the favor and be more enthusiastic. Even though Su-Peision didn't care about her reputation and other people's words now, this kind of thing still made her uncomfortable when Ling Jing said it out loud. Did I say something wrong? Ignoring the hint in his eyes, Su-Peision looked at the time. When are we going home? She had been playing for 2 days, and she had to go back to the company tomorrow. The company's affairs, including the project Su Chenghui was working on at hand. Su Chenghui had already returned to Lin City. As one of the people in charge, she naturally had to keep an eye on him. Let's stay for another day and go back tomorrow. Ling Jing said rather shamelessly, anyway, we're already here. Isn't it good to completely relax? Ling Jing. Su-Peision stared at his face and didn't want to joke with him. I said I would accompany you for 2 days, and now it's already been 2 days. Tisk, Ling Jing looked at her cold face and thought of how passionate this woman was in bed and how cold she was when she got out of bed. He had the urge to let her show such a passionate and uncontrollable side during the day. He got up and walked to the chair Su-Peision was sitting on. The lounge chairs in the club were very wide. He successfully squeezed half of his body into it, and then he took the opportunity to circle her into his arms. Why do I feel like I'm accompanying you? His lips gently rubbed her neck, and his voice was very soft. Look, you're here to soak in the hot spring and have a spa. You usually go to work every day, and you're so tense. It's rare to have such relaxation. Tell me, are you accompanying me, or am I accompanying you? When he kissed her, Su-Peision subconsciously shrank her body. Ling Jing, let go of me. Do you admit that I'm actually accompanying you? Ling Jing insisted on an answer. In the past 2 days, Su Peijian had indeed been very relaxed, so relaxed that she allowed Ling Jing to be so intimate with her in such a public setting. He looked around. Fortunately, this place was very private, and no one else was walking here. When his lips fell on her earlobe, Su Peijian finally couldn't bear it anymore. She turned around and avoided his kiss. "Isn't it right for you to accompany me?" Ling Jing choked and looked at the calmness on the woman's face. He somewhat wanted to strangle her. However, he endured it. He understood that a little impatience would spoil great plans. He curled his lips, raised his hand, and gently stroked her lips, watching her full lips become more and more delicate because of his movements. "Yes, it's right for me to accompany you. But I think I've done much more than accompanying you in the past 2 days. Don't you think you should give me some reward?" "Reward?" Su Peijian frowned slightly. Without waiting for her to speak, Ling Jing pointed his finger on her lips. "Don't mention money, or I'll be unhappy." "Then what do you want?" She had indeed been very relaxed these past 2 days. In fact, from the time she was imprisoned to the time she had been released from prison, this was a rare time for her to relax. In this regard, Ling Jing was right. Chapter 839. Su Peijian looked at Ling Jing's face and believed that he wanted more, so she didn't object. "All right." Ling Jing smiled again. This man's appearance was indeed very deceptive. When he smiled, it always made people feel as if the clouds and fog had dispersed. Su Peijian closed her eyes and suppressed the strange feeling in her heart. As the eldest daughter of the Su family, she had seen countless men. How could she be bewitched by a man's appearance? Not to mention the appearance of a hooligan. So what if he had a good appearance? It was just a face. Ling Jing didn't argue with Su Peijian to the end. At night, the car drove into the parking lot of Rome Park. After playing for 2 days, Su Peijian was a little tired. It was mainly because Ling Jing was too good at making trouble. He seemed to have endless energy. Day and night, whether it was in bed or out of bed, she was full of energy. In this aspect, he was qualified to be a gigolo. Su Peijian looked at the person in front of her, and there was a flash of surprise in her eyes. "Why are you here?" She had been following up on the case left by Su Qinghui. The person sent by the other party was the vice president of the company. Before that, it was the president of the other party who personally contacted Su Qinghui. The CEO of the company said that he had something to do these few days, so Su Peijian didn't think in that direction. Today, when he saw the visitor, he was surprised to find out that the president he was talking about was Lin Feixing. "Yes. I only found out after I joined the company." Lin Feixing wore a faint smile on his face. When he entered the company, he saw the report brought by the vice president, as well as a new round of proposals. When he saw Su Peijian's name, he was pleasantly surprised. "I didn't expect President Su, who we've been talking about cooperation with, to be your father." "What a coincidence." "I didn't expect that either." In fact, Su Qinghui seemed to have mentioned it once before. However, at that time, she was a little absent-minded and focused on the cooperation with the other party. Naturally, she did not notice the name that was mentioned only once. Lin Feixing smiled. His eyes were filled with surprise. "It's not just a coincidence, it's also fate. Since we are so fated, why don't we have lunch together?" "Sure." Su Peijian didn't reject it. In fact, Lin Feixing had been sending her messages from time to time in the past few days. Out of politeness, she would reply. There was no further contact, nor was there any ambiguity between them. It was just like making a new friend. She was surprised to see Lin Feixing here. The vice president and secretary of the other party immediately entered the conference room. The two of them had a tacit understanding. They didn't talk about what had happened before. Instead, they talked about work. In the past, Su Peijian's impression of Lin Feixing was that he looked like a successful elite. And the process of the two of them talking about business also confirmed this point. As the CEO of a large company, he was naturally capable. Su Peijian liked smart people. She could tell that Lin Feixing was the same. The two of them shared the same view in many aspects. The negotiation went smoothly. After that, Lin Feixing asked the vice president and his secretary to leave. He stood up and walked over to Su Peijian. Peijian, you really surprised me. Thank you. After Su Peijian finished speaking, she did not forget to add, however, I will not agree to your conditions just because you praised me. Lin Feixing laughed. Peijian, you are really interesting. Come on, let's go eat. Su Peijian did not object. The two of them left the conference room and entered the elevator together. Peijian, what do you want to eat? Western food or Chinese food? I'm fine with either. It doesn't matter. Then let's have Chinese food. Lin Feixing smiled. Anyone who has stayed abroad will know that no matter how many countries you visit, Chinese food will always be the best. Of course. No matter where the food was, it always lacked flavor when compared to Chinese food. However, as a returnee, Lin Feixing did not become a banana man. Su Peijian felt that it was good. Because the two of them had to work in the afternoon, they chose a nearby Cantonese restaurant with a good environment. How about Cantonese food? It's okay. I'm fine with anything. Lin Feixing and Su Peijian entered the restaurant and found a seat near the corner. Lin Feixing was very gentlemanly. He not only pulled out a chair for Su Peijian to sit down. He asked for her opinion first when the menu was served. Su Peijian did not give any opinion. Lin Feixing followed Su Peijian's habit and ordered a few specialties. While waiting for the dishes to be served, he looked at Su Peijian. If it was just superficial before, it was now that he was moved. Peijian, what do you think about what I said to you last time? After talking about business, it was naturally time to talk about personal matters. Su Peijian looked up at him. Lin Feixing's eyes were sincere. She could tell that he was telling the truth. Su Peijian lowered her head to drink her tea. She knew that Xiang Kaiping liked Lin Feixing very much. She also knew that Xiang Kaiping would be happy if she could be with Lin Feixing. However, she said, there are some things that I haven't thought about yet. Let's not talk about these things today. Okay. This was Su Peijian's attitude. Lin Feixing was disappointed, but he was not very unhappy. It would be abnormal if Su Peijian agreed to him immediately. He liked Su Peijian like this. She was calm and rational. No matter what situation she was in, she seemed to be very calm. It's okay. I can wait. You can take your time to think about it. Su Peijian did not have any special feelings for Lin Feixing. He did not care about her past, and he was also the person that Xiang Kaiping liked. Putting aside the factor of love, Lin Feixing was indeed a very good marriage partner. However, that was all. As for the future, they would talk about it later. Ling Jing turned over and got down from Su Peijian's body. Both of them were covered in sweat, and they felt very sticky. Su Peijian did not want to move, but her body was really uncomfortable. She pushed Ling Jing and motioned for him to let go of her. Ling Jing did not let go. Not only did he not let go, but he also buried his face in Su Peijian's neck. Move away. No. Ling Jing held her waist and leaned over to kiss her lips. I don't want to. Ling Jing, you haven't fulfilled the conditions you promised me last time. What do you want? Ling Jing supported his body with one hand and stared at her face with burning eyes. Tomorrow is the weekend. How about spending 2 more days with me? No. I'm not free. Part of the project they were currently working on was overseas. She had a business trip tomorrow. You're not free on the weekend? I already said that your company will not collapse if you don't go to work for a day. Ling Jing. I have a business trip tomorrow. I'm not playing. Business trip? Ling Jing narrowed his eyes. What was there to go on a business trip in her small department store? Where are you going? Could it be that she wanted to leave him behind again in the name of a business trip? Ling Jing was inexplicably unhappy with this thought. Chapter 840. Where are you going? With whom? His possessive tone made Su Peijian frown. She realized that Ling Jing was getting more and more greedy since he went to the hot spring with her last time. Su Peijian didn't like his possessiveness, not to mention anything else. Who I go with and where I go have nothing to do with you, right? How can it have nothing to do with me? Ling Jing clasps her waist and is very dissatisfied with her move of distancing herself. Anyway, you are also my woman. Naturally, you have the right to ask, right? I am your woman. Su Peijian's expression didn't change, but there was a hint of sarcasm in her eyes. Are you sure? She belonged to herself and didn't belong to anyone else. Aren't you? Su Peijian pulled his hand away from her waist and prepared to get up. Ling Jing, you seem to have forgotten your identity. She hadn't said those words in a while. During this time, the two of them had a tacit understanding. Su Peijian didn't spend much time with Xiang Kaiping in the villa. She had been busy with work recently, and Xiang Kaiping knew that she would go to the company when she wanted to see her. Su Peijian spent almost every day with Ling Jing in the hot spring for more than half a month. No matter what Ling Jing's motive was, he was really good to her. He took care of her emotions and feelings in every way. She enjoyed this kind of simple relationship and also enjoyed being with Ling Jing every night. She admitted that Ling Jing was quite a good lover who could always make her feel relaxed and happy. But wasn't that Ling Jing's duty? Since he was the man she spent money on, shouldn't he put her first in everything? She didn't think there was anything wrong with her thinking. But Ling Jing's current behavior made her realize Ling Jing's greed. She didn't like it. Ling Jing thought that he had been unprecedentedly patient and flattering Su Peijian during this period of time. He was the dignified young Master Ling. When had he been so careful to flatter a woman? If it weren't for his own purpose, he would have killed a woman like Su Peijian in minutes. It was just a matter of waving his hand. Who am I? He couldn't control his anger. He held Su Peijian, who was about to leave, again and pressed her under his body. Tell me, who am I? You, Ling Jing in front of her made Su Peijian feel danger. Her intuition told her to escape now. But she didn't have the chance. Ling Jing lowered his head and began to bite Su Peijian's lips. He had never been a gentle lover. Most of the time, she acted according to her own will. Attack, plunder, barbaric strength, rude treatment. I am your man. He demanded fiercely, not giving her a chance to escape at all. Su Peijian, I hope you remember that I am your man now. Lunatic. Su Peijian struggled. Let go of me. The only response she got was Ling Jing's endless suppression and demands. That night, Ling Jing was like a crazy beast. The young man's stamina and energy were always frighteningly good. Su Peijian was no match for him and was defeated by him. Ling Jing did not stop because of her concession, but more and more wanted to conquer her. After finishing it in the room, he carried her to the bathroom to clean up and did it again. When he came out of the bathroom, he didn't wait for her to dry off and pressed her down on the sofa in the room again. In the end, Su Peijian almost lost consciousness. The last thought that remained was that she wanted to break off the relationship. Su Peijian didn't have time to break off the relationship with Ling Jing. The next morning, she couldn't get up at all. The weather in Rome City was getting warmer, but it was still very cold at this time. Ling Jing carried her in the bathroom and didn't help her dry the water on her hair in time. Su Peijian, who had been tossed around for a long time, was sweating all over. Ling Jing woke up early in the morning and didn't realize that he was still angry about yesterday's incident. He had already decided that yesterday was just the beginning. He had to let this woman know how powerful he was. He was still thinking about how to deal with Su Peijian when he found that something was wrong with Su Peijian. Her breathing was heavier than usual. When he touched her, he found that her temperature was also higher than usual. Ling Jing finally realized that Su Peijian was sick. Staring at Su Peijian on the bed, whose face had turned red because of the fever, Ling Jing paused for a minute and finally had a reaction. Instead of sending Su Peijian to the hospital, he called the Ling family's private doctor. Fever, 39.5 degrees. Give her an injection to reduce the fever, and she'll be fine after taking some medicine. The doctor looked at Su Peijian on the bed. He wasn't sure what the relationship between the other party and the young master was, but he didn't ask much. Then hurry up and give it. Okay. Su Peijian was unconscious of the fever. Someone gave her an injection. She felt the pain and frowned slightly. At that moment, no coldness or arrogance could be seen on her face. Her little face was burning red, and her brows were slightly furrowed. Her whole body revealed a vulnerability that Ling Jing had never seen before. After sending the doctor away, Ling Jing looked at the medicine left by the bedside. It was rare for him to be kind. He went to the kitchen to pour a glass of water. He wanted Su Peijian to take the medicine. Su Peijian didn't cooperate at all. Her mouth was tightly closed, and she had no intention of opening it. Ling Jing stared at her face for a long time. Because of the fever, Su Peijian's lips were a little redder than usual. At this time, Ling Jing had no other thoughts. After thinking about it, he forced the medicine into her mouth. After drinking some water, he lowered his head and poured it into her lips. The warm water entered her throat, and the medicine was swallowed by Su Peijian unconsciously. After feeding her, Ling Jing realized what he had done. He put down the cup and stared at Su Peijian with hatred. Damn woman, how dare you ask me to serve you? You really don't want to live. When you recover, I will teach you a lesson. As he said so, he got up and wanted to ask someone to bring some digestible food. With Su Peijian's current physical condition, she could only drink porridge or soup. Before she could call for help, Su Peijian, who was sleeping on the bed, had sweat all over her forehead. She was sweating profusely and kept talking in her sleep. Her head shook slightly, and her face was full of pain. Ling Jing, who was about to leave, stopped. He stared at Su Peijian's face and seemed to be unsure. Su Peijian? Su Peijian didn't respond to him. She was trapped in a nightmare and couldn't get out of it. Ling Jing didn't want to pay attention to her, but Su Peijian raised her hand at this time. He didn't know what she was dreaming about, but she gently waved her hand in the void. Only then did Ling Jing realize that Su Peijian seemed to be talking in her sleep. He stared at her face for a long time and lowered his head, trying to listen to what she was saying. Don't, this time, Ling Jing finally heard it clearly. Su Peijian said don't. Don't what? Su Peijian? Don't, Su Peijian said again. Ling Jing stared at her face for a long time and gently moved to her ear. Chapter 841. Don't. Don't what? Ling Jing moved a little closer. Su Peijian was in a daze. Her voice was very soft and couldn't be heard clearly. He narrowed his eyes and stared at her face, moving closer to her lips. Because of her fever, her breath was hot. He was waiting for her to speak, but she didn't. When he got up and was about to leave, Su Peijian began to talk in her sleep again. Don't, Dad. Don't, Mom. Why? Why? She finally heard the last few sentences more clearly, but Ling Jing was startled. He stared at Su Peijian's face and thought about the information he had found. Mom. Why? He stood up straight and stared straight at Su Peijian's face. After Su Peijian went to prison, she dreamed of her past almost every night. When she was the daughter of the Su family, when she was Li Qinshue's daughter. She still remembered how she was held in Li Qinshue's arms and listened to her fairy tales. She also remembered how Li Qianxue carefully cultivated her, from music, chess, calligraphy and painting to business and economics. She still remembered how Li Qianxue thought about her and arranged a marriage with Qiu Yanba for her. She thought it was the best marriage. She also remembered how Li Qianxue and Su Qinghui stayed by her bed when she was sick, afraid that she would feel uncomfortable. Those memories were so deep that unless Su Peijian lost her memory, she couldn't get rid of the first 20 years of her life. But later, she served her sentence in prison day after day. She waited day after day, but other than Xiang Kaiping, Li Qianxue didn't come. She understood. She couldn't go back. She could never go back. She couldn't get back what she had lost. Everything she once had became someone else's. It had nothing to do with her anymore. She still remembered when she celebrated her first birthday in prison. Other than Xiang Kaiping, who came to see her in the morning, no one else said a word of blessing to her. Her birthday in the first year would be the grandest event in Lin City. She would receive countless expensive gifts, and countless people who wanted to establish connections with the Su family and the Li family would come to congratulate her. Most importantly, she would have her parents, grandfather, and brother, Su Yusen, at her birthday party. Those were her most cherished family members. However, when she celebrated her birthday, none of those people appeared again. She kept waiting until midnight. When the flame went out, she finally understood that she couldn't go back. She couldn't go back to the past. Ever since that day, he had never dreamed of her past or her past. But today, she didn't know what was going on. Once again, he fell into that nightmare. She dreamed that Li Qianxue broke up with Su Qinghui and that Li Qianxue looked at her. Her tearful eyes seemed to be filled with helplessness. "You are not my daughter." "Wrong, everything is wrong." Su Qinghui smiled bitterly at her in the dream. "I'm sorry, Peijian. I've done this to you. Peijian, forgive me. Peijian, I'm sorry." Su Qinghui's voice was like a curse to Su Peijian. Over and over again, it was just to remind her that she was not Li Qianxue's child. So what if she was not a child of the Li family? Could the feelings of more than 20 years be gone just like that? She really didn't understand. In the end, she didn't want to understand either. But maybe it was because of the illness, or maybe it was because of her deepest desire. Su Peijian lay there powerlessly. The softest and most secret part of her body was exposed in front of others at this time. She thought that no one would know, but she didn't know that Ling Jing, who was beside her, had been standing by the bed, staring at Su Peijian's face. Watching her sleep, watching her talk in her sleep, watching her cry in her sleep. Ling Jing subconsciously reached out his hand. Just as he was about to touch Su Peijian's cheek, he suddenly withdrew his hand. He took a step back and stared at Su Peijian's face with an unreadable expression. Su Peijian slept for a long time. When she opened her eyes, it was dark outside. She had a bad headache. She blinked and couldn't tell where she was for a moment. The room was lit up, and the sudden light made her narrow her eyes. Her body was helped up, and there was a warm touch on her lips. Warm water entered her throat, and she swallowed instinctively. It was also at this time that she saw clearly who the person in front of her was. Ling Jing was holding a cup and carefully feeding her water. His eyes were gentle, and at that moment, his devilish face actually seemed to have a hint of gentleness. She was stunned for a moment and didn't respond further. "You're awake, so take the medicine," Ling Jing said. He put the cup in his hand on the bedside table, poured out the medicine, and put it into Su Peijian's mouth. It was bitter. The pill was very bitter. Su Peijian frowned. Ling Jing fed her water again. She was sick, and she took the medicine, so her mouth became more and more bitter. Her delicate eyebrows were knitted so tightly that a mosquito could be squeezed to death. "What's wrong?" Ling Jing looked at her with concern. Su Peijian looked at the gentleness in his eyes. For some reason, she blurted out the word bitter. "Bitter?" Ling Jing looked at her, then at the medicine on the side. Suddenly, he leaned over and kissed her lips. She was still sick, and she didn't have any strength in her body. Her mouth was also extremely bitter. However, the man still didn't dislike it at all. He directly gave her a deep kiss. She couldn't react at all, and the fever made her reason slower than usual. All her body could feel was the man's aura, the man's taste. She snuggled weakly in his arms, letting him kiss her wantonly. Until he finally let her go. He gently caressed her lips, his eyes as gentle as water. It won't be bitter like this, right? As he spoke, he took a pillow from the side and placed it behind her. I asked Xiao Zhao to come over and cook some porridge. You're sick, so you can only eat something light. Su Peijian didn't say anything. She watched Ling Jing get up and bring her porridge. Before she could reach out to take it, the man had already begun to feed her. It could be seen that Ling Jing had no experience doing this at all. His movements were very clumsy. He didn't even put the spoon in her mouth, but placed it on her lips. The slightly hot temperature made her avoid it. It's hot. Hot. Ling Jing glanced at the spoon, blew on it, and handed it to her again. This time, it wasn't hot. Su Peijian opened her mouth. The porridge was very bland. She had no taste in her mouth now, so it was actually the same no matter what she ate. Just looking at Ling Jing, she suddenly had a strange feeling. His relationship with her was based on money. It was normal for Ling Jing to please her, but he didn't need to do this. Su Peijian kept looking at Ling Jing as the porridge entered her stomach. He was also looking at her. His eyes were focused, and it actually made his usual devilish appearance a lot gentler. At this moment, Su Peijian's usually calm heart had a very imperceptible fluctuation. After finishing the porridge, Ling Jing put the bowl aside. How do you feel? Do you still want to sleep? Su Peijian shook her head. Give me my phone. Phone? Ling Jing thought of the phone ringing just now. He originally wanted to answer Su Peijian's call. In the end, he didn't answer it. A lack of forbearance in small matters would spoil great plans. He was patient and could endure. Holding her phone, Su Peijian looked at Ling Jing with a bit of inquisitiveness in her eyes. There were a total of 10 missed calls on her phone, from Xiang Kaiping, Su Qinghui, and Lin Feixing. After drinking the porridge, she felt much better and called Xiang Kaiping first. Peijian, Feixing said he couldn't find you, so he came to our house. Where are you? Mom, I'm fine. I just put my phone on silent mode and didn't receive any calls. Why is your voice so hoarse? I'm fine. I just have a little cold. You're sick. Xiang Kaiping suddenly became nervous. Where are you? Are you in Rome Garden? I'll come to see you now. Mom, it's okay. I've taken the medicine, and it's almost done. I'll be fine after a nap. Are you really fine? I'm really fine. Mom, don't worry. It's just a little cold. I'll be fine after a nap. How could Su Peijian dare to let Xiang Kaiping come? If she really came, how would she explain when she met Ling Jing? Then have a good rest. By the way, call Feixing back later. He's very worried about you. I know, I will. After hanging up, Su Peijian called Su Qinghui. He was in Lin City. Lin Feixing called Su Peijian, but she didn't answer, so he tried to contact Su Qinghui. Su Qinghui heard Su Peijian's voice and knew that she had a cold, so he told her to have a good rest. I'll come to see you in 2 days. Okay. After hanging up, Su Peijian felt a headache. However, she did remember that she had agreed to go on a business trip with Lin Feixing today. Sorry. As soon as the call was connected, Su Peijian apologized first. I have a cold. I'm not feeling well, so I haven't gone to the airport since I slept. You're sick. Lin Feixing's tone suddenly changed. Where are you? I came to see you. I went to your house to look for you, but your mom said you weren't home. I'm in my apartment near my company. You don't have to come. I'll be fine after a nap. I'm really sorry that I didn't meet you today. I might have to trouble you to explain it to me later. It's okay. You're sick, so have a good rest. I'll go on my own this time. Take care of yourself. Okay. Su-Peijan really felt sorry. Sorry to trouble you. I'm really sorry this time. I'm sorry. I didn't know you were sick. After hanging up, Ling Jing happened to come in from outside. When she called Xiang Kaiping earlier, he had already gone out. Such a thoughtful gesture made Su-Peijan look at him in a new light. This man was really annoying when he was clingy, but sometimes he was very gentlemanly. He was obviously a hooligan, but he had such a gentlemanly temperament. It was amazing. Ling Jing came in and saw Su-Peijan holding the phone and looking at him. He took a few steps forward, took the phone out of her palm, and put it aside. You're not well yet. Rest more. As he spoke, he put her hand in his palm and held it tightly. Business can never be finished. When the body collapses, there will be nothing left. Su-Peijan was silent. It felt very strange to hear such words from a person like Ling Jing. Do you want to sleep for a while more? No. Su-Peijan shook her head. I feel very uncomfortable. I want to take a shower. Let me help you take a shower. Ling Jing volunteered, but Su-Peijan instinctively refused. No. If it weren't for him yesterday, she wouldn't have been sick or caught a cold. Ling Jing circled her body as she was about to get up and stared at her face. Don't worry, I'm not so perverted as to bully a patient. Su-Peijan didn't believe him, but Ling Jing had already got up and went in the direction of the bathroom. When he came out after filling the hot water for Su-Peijan, he saw that Su-Peijan was really going to get out of bed. He quickly went forward and picked her up. Ling Jing, put me down. I said, I'll help you. Ling Jing's eyes were gentle, and he fixed his gaze on Su-Peijan. Su-Peijan couldn't refuse him anymore. Her clothes were taken off. Su-Peijan looked at Ling Jing's movements, and for the first time, she felt a little shy. Soon, her body was put into the bathtub. The water temperature was very suitable, and her body was surrounded by water. If Ling Jing hadn't messed around with her in this bathtub yesterday, she wouldn't have caught a cold. At first, she looked at Ling Jing with some defense. Later, she realized that when he said he would help her take a bath, he really did help her take a bath. She watched as Ling Jing washed her body. At that moment, she suddenly returned to her childhood. There were servants at home, but Li Qianxue and Su Qinghui really doted on her. Most of the time, they would rather do it themselves. Li Qianxue bathed her, and Su Qinghui gently dried her hair. His palm touched that extremely secret place, and Su-Peijan actually felt that her face was burning for a moment. For Ling Jing, this bath was also extremely difficult. The beauty in the bathtub had lost her usual fierce aura because of her illness, because of the beauty's illness, and instead, she was a little more delicate. That different appearance brought a brand new excitement. He couldn't wait to directly do this damned woman here and now. He resisted the impulse in his heart, and suppressed the almost uncontrollable excitement in his lower body. He calmly bathed her, then picked her up and wiped her. From beginning to end, his movements were extremely gentle. Su-Peijan was carried in his arms and returned to the room. He carefully dried the water for her and put her on the bed. Have a good rest. Su-Peijan was still sick and weak. She closed her eyes and allowed herself to fall asleep. It was just that she had slept too much during the day. Although she was sleepy, she couldn't fall asleep so quickly. Ling Jing followed her to the bed, lay down beside her, and reached out to encircle her in his arms. Sleep. She looked up at him. He smiled at her and leaned over to kiss her on the lips. I'll sleep with you. You'll be fine after a good sleep. Preposterous reasoning. She had never heard of anyone who could be cured after a good sleep. Su-Peijan wanted to refute, but after her body was encircled by his arms, she really relaxed. Closing her eyes and feeling Ling Jing's hot chest in front of her, she finally indulged herself and fell into a deep sleep. Her body subconsciously snuggled in Ling Jing's direction, tightly pressed against his chest. Chapter 842. Su Peijian got off the bed and casually draped a robe over her body. She moved her limbs and felt that her body was still weak, but not as weak as the day before yesterday. She didn't expect that she, who had always been in good health, would be sick for 2 days. He had slept the day before yesterday and the day before yesterday. He was finally in better spirits today. Looking at the calendar, he didn't have to worry about going to work because today was the weekend. After sleeping for 2 days, he was exhausted. She went to the bathroom and turned on the water. The bath made her feel much more comfortable. Before she could get up from the bathtub, the bathroom door was hurriedly opened and Ling Jing came in from the outside. When he saw her, there was obvious disapproval in his eyes. "You haven't recovered yet. What are you doing?" He picked up a large towel from the side, walked over, and reached out to lift Su Peijian's body. He wrapped her in a towel and carried her out of the room. "If you're not feeling well, you should rest more. You can bathe anytime. What if you catch a cold again?" Ling Jing kept talking, with some concern and some blame in her eyes. Su Peijian didn't say anything. She let Ling Jing dry her body and let him carry her back to the bed. Looking at the side of Ling Jing's face, she thought about how Ling Jing had been taking care of her when she was sick these past 2 days. He could have asked little Zhao to do it, but he didn't. He wouldn't have asked someone else to do it. As long as it was related to her, Ling Jing would automatically do it. Eat and take a bath. In fact, she didn't think she needed anyone to take care of her. No one will take care of you if you get sick in prison. After being released from prison, she lived with Xiang Kaiping. Xiang Kaiping always took care of her and cared about her in every aspect, but that kind of care always made her feel pressured. Without the support of the Li family and the Su family, Su Qinxi was not a good person. She no longer had the capital to act spoiled and willful. If it was just a slight discomfort, she would rather endure it on her own. But Ling Jing's care and concern for the past 2 days made her feel like she had returned to the past. When she was not well, when she was sick, there were people around her, taking care of her. She seemed to have become the daughter of the Li family and the Su family again. Her relationship with Ling Jing was not like that. She knew it, and she knew it. The relationship between the two of them was nothing more than a kept woman and a kept woman. Ling Jing could take care of her or not. There won't be any effect. Ling Jing's actions made Su Peijian feel that perhaps it really had nothing to do with money. "Look, your hair is wet." Looking at Su Peijian's wet hair, Ling Jing got up to find a hair dryer to dry Su Peijian's hair. In fact, this action was very rare for him. His movements were very clumsy, and there were a few times when Su Peijian felt like her scalp was about to be scalded off. However, after noticing the slight change in his expression, he quickly moved the hairdryer further away. She could not help looking up at him again. Ling Jing's enchanting face, with a bit of concentration at this time, gently lifted her hair, took the hairdryer not far away, and dried her back and forth. His expression was so serious that it gave her the illusion that the person in front of her wasn't drying her hair, but was doing some amazing project. After drying her hair, he gently combed her hair and put it behind her head. Done. Realizing that Su Peijian was staring at him, he suddenly bent down to look her in the eyes. Chapter 843. It would have been better if he hadn't opened his mouth. Su Peijian looked at Ling Jing and suddenly curled her lips. That's not how it should be used. Really? Ling Jing was still holding the hairdryer in his hand. He put the hairdryer aside, held Su Peijian's waist, and approached her. Then tell me, how should I describe my face? Charm all living things? Handsomeness? His long and narrow phoenix eyes were slightly raised. When the man smiled, he did have the capital to be bewitching. Su Peijian looked at him and shook her head. As thick as a city wall, bullets can't penetrate it. Ling Jing narrowed his eyes and looked at Su Peijian's serious joke. He suddenly reached out and scratched the back of her waist. The two of them spent more time together, and he knew that she was very sensitive there. You dare to laugh at me? As soon as he made this move, Su Peijian couldn't help but laugh. She twisted her body, trying to avoid his hand. Stop. Ling Jing, enough. Enough. She was still sick, and being treated like this by him, she laughed until she couldn't breathe. Her beautiful face was as red as a pomegranate flower in June. Ling Jing stopped and looked at the woman's charming appearance. Suddenly, he was tempted. He lowered his head and kissed her lips. Before Su Peijian could come back to her senses, she was kissed by him. In front of her was Ling Jing's enlarged face, and his seductive phoenix eyes were filled with her shadow. Her breath stopped, and in the next second, her body was pressed against the bed by him. She was usually no match for him, and now that she was sick, she was no match for Ling Jing. She put her hand on his chest and pushed, but she couldn't. In between breaths, she reached out and held his shoulder. Ling Jing. His breathing was hot, his face was burning, and his heart was beating fast. She shook her head and controlled the wild thoughts in her heart. I'm sick. Don't mess around. I'll infect you. Really? Ling Jing's breathing was a little heavy. He raised his hand and touched Su Peijian's forehead. Then infect me. That way, you'll be fine. How could that work? Su Peijian completely lost her mind in the other party's plunder. With his movements, she fell into the tide of passion that he brought. At the same time, there was also the joy that he gave her. When Ling Jing walked in, she saw Su Peijian on the phone. She was in good spirits. Although the two of them had messed around yesterday, Su Peijian had sweated a lot. After a good night's sleep, she felt much better when she woke up this morning. Xiang Kaiping was worried and called her several times. There were also Su Chenghui and Lin Feixing. Su Peijian told them that she was safe and felt that they were making a mountain out of a molehill. It was just a cold, not some incurable disease. He put down the phone and saw Ling Jing enter the door. There was a rare softness in her eyes. Morning. Ling Jing stepped forward, walked behind her, and wrapped her waist into her arms. What do you think? How do you feel? I'm fine. He held her a little too tightly. Su Peijian wanted to move away from his embrace, but he turned her around to face him. Since you're fine, let's go out. Go out? Su Peijian rejected instinctively. Where? A date. Ling Jing? It's boring to stay at home anyway. Why don't we go out for a walk? Maybe you'll be in a good mood after going out for a walk. Su Peijian looked at Ling Jing's sloppy face and listened to his specious words. You have a lot of fallacies. No. What I said is true. If you don't believe me, follow me out and try. You'll know. Su Peijian smiled. After lying in bed for so many days, she was really tired. When she met the expectation in Ling Jing's eyes, she nodded. Okay, where do you want to go? Anywhere. I'm fine with anything. Su Peijian thought for a moment. Rome City was still very cold, and the neighborhood where she lived was considered a business circle. Then let's walk. Don't drive. We'll go wherever we go. No problem. Ling Jing got up and went to get Su Peijian clothes. Looking at his attentive figure, Su Peijian's lips curved subconsciously. When she realized that Ling Jing could bring her such emotions, she suddenly turned her face away uncomfortably. The two of them held hands and walked out of Rome Garden together. Because it was the weekend, there were many people on the road. The two of them didn't have a destination, so they just walked forward hand in hand. There was a department store under Su Peijian's name not far ahead. As she walked, her occupational disease flared up and she wanted to take a look. Ling Jing didn't ask where she was going. He followed her wherever she went. However, when the two of them walked on the road together, the number of people turning their heads was very high. One of them had a charming, delicate appearance, and the other had evil features. Ling Jing didn't notice the gazes on him and just followed Su Peijian into the department store. As usual, the first floor was basically cosmetics and jewelry. On the weekend, there were many customers at the cosmetics counter. Although there weren't many customers at the jewelry store, there were still quite a few. Halfway through, Ling Jing suddenly took Su Peijian's hand and entered the Patek next to him. It was the Philippe counter. You want to buy a watch? I'm just looking around. Su Peijian followed him into the door. She had many of Philippe's watches. They were all in Lin's city. In the past, she often received these gifts on her birthday. But ever since she came out of prison, she didn't wear them much. She thought that Ling Jing was looking for her, but she didn't expect him to walk to the female watch counter. Hello, sir. Is there anything you like? Let me see this one. The shop assistant took it out. Ling Jing picked it up and put it on Su Peijian's hand. Ling Jing? She didn't intend to buy a watch. There were already many at home. It suits you very well. The rose gold dial was simple and didn't have too many decorations. There was only a circle of broken diamonds around it. Try it on. He personally put the watch on Su Peijian. Su Peijian's wrist was slender and small. The watch unexpectedly suited her. She looked up at Ling Jing, who was holding her hand and admiring it. It looks good. As he spoke, he took out a card and handed it to the shop assistant. I'll take this one. Just wear it and leave. Su Peijian glanced at him. That card seemed to be given to him by her. As if knowing what she was thinking, Ling Jing leaned close to her ear. Although it's your card, since you gave it to me, it's my money, right? He was right. Su Peijian had nothing to say. The moment the shop assistant turned around, Ling Jing whispered to her again, I gave you a watch. Shouldn't you return the favor? You can buy it yourself if you like. No, I want you to give it to me. Ling Jing held her hand with a persistent face. The meaning of your gift is naturally different, isn't it? Su Peijian glanced at him and rarely did she refute. Her eyes searched around the counter and finally settled on a classic retro piece with a black surface. This one. Take it out and let me see. The shop assistant took out the watch and Su Peijian handed it to Ling Jing. However, he stood still and looked at her with a hint in his eyes. I didn't give it to you like this just now. This guy, he was really. Su Peijian picked up the watch, grabbed Ling Jing's hand, and put it on for him. It had to be said that she had good taste. This watch matched Ling Jing's temperament very well. Not bad. Ling Jing smiled. He was very satisfied with Su Peijian's understanding. I think it's not bad either. Looking at Su Peijian's slightly smiling face, he suddenly leaned over and kissed her on the cheek. I like it very much, thank you. Su Peijian had never behaved like this in public. For a moment, her face was full of uneasiness. She looked around and found that the shop assistants were teasing her. She took out her card as if nothing had happened and handed it to the shop assistant to swipe. Don't worry. Ling Jing shook his wrist. I will definitely wear it well and take good care of it. These words sounded like words of love. Su Peijian didn't want to believe it, but when she met Ling Jing's serious eyes, she inexplicably believed that what he said was true. The entire morning was neither fast nor slow. The two of them walked and stopped from time to time. Later, they got a lot of trophies. Time passed just like that as they strolled around. It was almost noon. Ling Jing looked at the time. Are you hungry? What do you want to eat? Whatever. Let's eat Cantonese food. Something light. You haven't recovered from your illness yet. Su Peijian couldn't help but look at him because of his words. Don't look at me. You can only eat light food now. Su Peijian didn't say anything. The two of them found a good-looking Cantonese restaurant nearby and had lunch. Su Peijian thought that this was the end. She could go home, but Ling Jing dragged her to watch a movie. I don't want to watch it. Since it's a date, we naturally have to do a full set. Let's go. If you don't want to watch it, I allow you to sleep in the theater. Su Peijian was annoyed by his words. Then I might as well go home and sleep. That won't do. You promised to accompany me today. How can you go back on your word? Whether she agreed or not, Ling Jing took her to the theater. She didn't know when he bought the tickets. When they arrived at the theater, he directly picked up the tickets and took her into the theater. Su Peijian hadn't watched a movie for a long time. Ling Jing chose a standard Hollywood sci-fi film. The male and female leads traveled in space. The male lead woke up unexpectedly. He was lonely, so he also woke up the female lead. Then, the two of them experienced a romantic space trip together. Su Peijian was a little tired, but she didn't really fall asleep. After watching the movie very seriously, she found that Ling Jing was the one who fell asleep when the movie ended. He just leaned there with his eyes closed. The stray hair on his forehead hung down, and his quiet sleeping face made him look like an innocent child. They sat in the couple's seat, and there were only two of them. Other people around had already left. Su Peijian wasn't in a hurry to get up. She just quietly watched as she met Ling Jing. The rascal when they first met, the light flirting after he clung to her, the ruthlessness when he was stuck in traffic, and the gentleness when he took care of her when she was sick. Ling Jing, what kind of person are you? There really weren't many things in Su Peijian's life that could make her curious. She was born with wealth that ordinary people couldn't reach, and she also had a family background and appearance that everyone envied. For the first time in her life, she was a little curious about a man. Chapter 844. The credits were already playing on the screen. The interlude was very nice, but the lights were very dim. Ling Jing opened her eyes at this time and looked straight at her. Her hand was still hanging in the air. The moment he opened his eyes, he saw her slender fingertips. His almond-shaped eyes raised slightly. He looked at her with a smile in his eyes. Holding her hand, he didn't care what kind of situation they were in. He opened his mouth and put her fingertips into his lips. Su Peijian had experience, but no one had ever flirted with her like this. She wanted to pull her hand back, but Ling Jing had already gotten up. He bit her fingertips with his teeth without using any force. Instead, he stared straight at her face. Are you trying to take advantage of me? With something in his mouth, his words were a little slurred. Su Peijian wanted to pull her hand back, but he put his other hand on her waist and pulled her into his arms. Su Peijian pulled her fingers out, and Ling Jing grabbed her hand again. He seemed to be smiling very proudly. How is it? Are you mesmerized by my beauty? This person was really shameless. Su Peijian looked at the smug look on his face calmly, her expression not changing at all. If you don't have beauty, how can you be worth 2 million? This woman. TSK, Ling Jing grabbed her hand and bit it again. His eyes were tinged with anger. Do you have to say such disappointing words at this time? I don't think it's disappointing. I think it's the truth. She had indeed bought him with money. Was he afraid that she would say it? Ling Jing looked at her. Just when Su Peijian thought he would be angry, he suddenly kissed her lips forcefully. Crazy. Su Peijian was anxious. They were in a movie theater, and there might be cleaners coming in to clean up later. She struggled for a while, but she couldn't break away from his hand. He kissed her until she was almost suffocated, then he let her go. He stepped back a little and looked at her face. Woman, at least you affirmed my appearance. Su Peijian shook her head, a little disapproving of his thick skin. She got up and wanted to leave, but Ling Jing grabbed her back on his lap and sat her down. You're leaving just like that? What else? I fell asleep and didn't finish watching it. Why don't we watch another one? If you want to watch it, you can watch it here alone. I won't keep you company. Ling Jing knew that it was time to stop. Without insisting any further, he got up and held her hand as they walked away. It was still early when the two of them left the cinema. The weather these few days was pretty good. Although it was a little cold, he was used to staying here, so it was all right. Where do you want to go next? Let's go home. Sure. Ling Jing listens to her saying, go home, and stretches out his long arm to hold her. If you say go home, then go home. Su Peijian was startled when he put his arm around her shoulder. Home. To her, Rome Garden was just an apartment, a place to rest. Actually, it couldn't be called a home. Turning to look at Ling Jing, she was a little curious about him for the first time. She swallowed the question she wanted to ask when it reached her mouth. Forget it, it's just a relationship between a kept woman and a kept woman. There was no need to ask too clearly. Look at me like this. Do you think I'm getting more and more handsome? If someone were to see Ling Jing's current appearance, their eyeballs would probably fall out. Su Peijian looked away. Forget it. She shouldn't be curious. Tell me, isn't it? Ling Jing wants an answer. Su Peijian glances at him and shakes her head. I just find that your skin is getting thicker and thicker. Woman, you don't mean what you say. I know you like me. You think too much. Su Peijian is unmoved. There is not even a trace of fluctuation in her eyes. Your narcissism is useless in front of me. Am I thinking too much? Why do I feel that you like me more and more? Ling Jing. It's not dark yet. After saying this, she doesn't speak again. Liking his appearance and certain abilities are indeed related. But this person? Forget it. Ling Jing secretly gritted his teeth, but he didn't give up and continued to walk forward with her in his arms. One day, he will make her love him so much that she can't extricate herself. However, before that, he has to think about how to make this woman fall in love with him. Su Peijian has been sick for a few days, and her work has been delayed a lot. After dinner, she ignored Ling Jing and went into the study. Most of the money in her hands has been used to participate in Su Qinghui's project. Although the share is not much, if it makes money, it will be quite a considerable income. In addition, the funds and securities she bought before have recently appreciated quite well. She browsed through the major financial news at home and abroad. After thinking about it, she sold 2 of the funds and bought the other 2 funds. She is quite skilled in buying and selling. The increase of money can't fill the void in her heart. But other than that, she can't find more fun. At this time, Ling Jing entered the door with a glass of milk in his hand. Woman, do you want me to remind you that you are still a patient now? Putting the glass of milk in front of Su Peijian, Ling Jing glanced at the computer screen, and then quickly looked away. Su Peijian picked up the glass of milk. The warm touch warms her from the palm of her hand to the heart. She glanced at Ling Jing and didn't get angry at the other party for breaking into the study. Thank you. Woman, I actually prefer you to thank me in another way. Ling Jing's words have a deeper meaning. Su Peijian didn't answer. She put the milk on the table and looked at Ling Jing's face. Didn't you say last time that you wanted to invest? Do you still want to? Ling Jing raised his eyebrows. Didn't you say that I can't afford your fees? You can't afford it, Su Peijian said bluntly. But just take it as a thank you gift for this glass of milk. And thank you for taking care of her when she was sick these few days. Then I'm making a profit? Yes. Do you want it? Yes. Of course. Ling Jing leaned close to her ear and gently breathed on her cheek. But I've spent all my money. How about I pay the debt with my body? This person is really... Su Peijian didn't expect Ling Jing to be serious. She raised her hand and pushed his head away. She looked at him very seriously. Ling Jing. Although it's easy for you to make money now, it's not a long-term solution. I'll help you invest. After you make money, you can do something else, whether it's a small business or a job. You'll be better than you are now. How long can it last if you treat people with beauty? It was rare for her to be kind. This was also a friendly reminder. What? Are you planning to abandon me? Don't worry, woman. Even if you don't want me, there are still many women lining up behind me, crying and shouting for me to pamper them. Do you believe me? I'm serious. Su Peijian didn't mean to joke with him. In prison, she had seen women who had lost their footing. Some were voluntary, and some weren't. No matter which one it was, those women would eventually find that such money was easy to come by, but it was not a long-term solution. Or, you can go learn something. Either way, it'll be better than what you're doing now. She was not a nosy person. She would say such a thing because Ling Jing had taken care of her these days. She could feel that Ling Jing wasn't a bad person. Although he was a little sloppy and picky, Su Peijian was willing to give him some conscientious advice for the sake of him taking care of her so carefully. Ling Jing looked at the seriousness in Su Peijian's eyes. He was afraid that she really thought of him as a gigolo. He smiled lightly, reached out and gently lifted her chin, looking her in the eyes. Are you planning for my future? TSK, woman, you still say you don't like me? If you don't like me, why are you thinking so much about me? Whatever you think. Su Peijian didn't push his hand away. Instead, she looked straight into the depths of his eyes. This is just a suggestion. Woman, I'm really touched that you're so considerate of me. Ling Jing put his hand on the side of her neck, leaned close to her face, and pressed his forehead against hers. There's nothing I can do to repay you. I can only devote myself to you. Here he goes again. Su Peijian pushed him away, stepped back a little, and looked at the computer screen. I promised you before, and I still have to give you $1 million. I'll use this $1 million to invest in you. For 3 months. After 3 months, all the money you earn will belong to you. When the time comes, you can take this money and start some business or small business. Ling Jing narrowed his eyes at her. He couldn't tell what he was feeling. He stared at her red lips that kept opening and closing, and finally kissed her lips. Okay, I'll listen to you. Su Peijian didn't like his flirting attitude, so she gently pushed him away. In front of Ling Jing, she started to operate the fund for him. Ling Jing sat next to her and wrapped his hands around her waist. He placed his chin on the pit of her neck and looked at her profile. When she stared at the screen, her eyes were focused and her expression was serious. When she was thinking about problems, her brows would unconsciously frown slightly. His heart felt like it was being gently scratched by a cat's claws. He picked her up at the same time she let go of the mouse. Ling Jing, woman. Ling Jing gently bit her lips. I'm hungry. You, Su Peijian pointed at the milk. Drink milk if you're hungry. If not, order takeout. I want to eat you more. Ling Jing held her whole body in his arms and went in the direction of the bed. When he saw the bottle of milk from the corner of his eyes suddenly lit up. But don't waste the milk. Looking at the evil smile on his lips, Su Peijian had a very bad feeling. Ling Jing, put me down. No. Ling Jing curled his lips, and his eyes became more and more evil. The night had just begun. In a rather elegantly decorated coffee shop, Lin Feixing pushed a box in front of Su Peijian. This is a gift I brought for you. Take a look and see if you like it. The two of them had just finished talking about business. This time, Lin Feixing went out to basically finalize the later stage of the cooperation. This time, he came to talk to her about the details, and secondly, it could be considered a date. Su Peijian glanced at the box. She recognized the logo on it. It was a relatively small but very stylish jewelry brand. Opening it, there was a small design of a starlight necklace. It abandoned the traditional 5-pointed star shape and used the shape of a 6-pointed star. I like it very much, thank you. As long as you like it. As Lin Feixing spoke, he picked up the necklace. Can I put it on for you? Su Peijian didn't wear jewelry when she went out today. She looked at Lin Feixing and didn't refuse. He got up, walked to her side, and put the necklace on for her. From beginning to end, he was quite polite. After putting it on, he immediately retreated and returned to his seat to sit down. It looks good. A beautiful person looks good wearing anything. He was indirectly praising Su Peijian's beauty. Su Peijian smiled. She had heard this kind of praise many times, and she really didn't feel anything. However, out of politeness, she still said thank you. Lin Feixing suddenly lowered his voice. Actually, I have a selfish motive. Meeting Su Peijian's puzzled gaze, he smiled. My name has the word Xing in it. This is a star-shaped necklace. I hope you can think of me often. This was a disguised form of words of love. Seriously speaking, Lin Feixing was indeed good. Whether it was in terms of family background, personality, or appearance. Love or passion might not be there, but a man like this would be a very suitable marriage partner. Forget it. She didn't answer, so Lin Feixing took a step back. I don't ask you to think of me often. I'm very satisfied if you can think of me from time to time. Su Peijian looked down, and unexpectedly, Ling Jing's face flashed through her mind. Since she was sick, the two of them had been together almost every day these few days. She enjoyed the fresh feeling that Ling Jing brought to her, whether it was the pleasure of her body or the stimulation brought by him always and not playing according to the rules. Compared to Ling Jing, Lin Feixing was a completely different person. If she really planned to date Lin Feixing, then her relationship with Ling Jing would definitely be cut off. What? Can't you think of me from time to time? Disappointment flashed through Lin Feixing's eyes, but in the end, he spread out his hands. It seems that I have to continue working hard to deepen my presence in your heart. Su Peijian thought of Xiang Caiping's constant worry for her. Finally, a smile appeared on her face. Then, I'll be waiting. That was equivalent to a positive answer. Lin Feixing smiled at once. I will definitely work hard. Su Peijian curled her lips. Perhaps, starting a new relationship would bring her a new life. Ling Jing's figure flashed through her mind, but she shook it off. A little hoodlum, a kept man. Between an overseas returnee and a promising young man, she didn't need to hesitate at all. She was right. Su Peijian made up her mind. However, at the last moment, she still turned back to Rhone Garden. If she decided to end things, she had to do it earlier. Although she was a sugar baby, she couldn't do something like having a foot in two boats. That would be unfair to Lin Feixing. Young master. Gu Xiu looked at Ling Jing with a headache. Madam misses you very much. She wants you to go home. What's there to miss? Ling Jing waved his hand indifferently. She has to spend a lot of energy taking care of the old man every day, right? I am very well. Don't let her miss me. Young master. Gu Xiu really had a headache with such a willful master. Shen Lefyu is still in the villa. She has been thinking of ways to find her brother recently. Let her go. A flash of calculation appeared in Ling Jing's eyes. He crooked his finger at Gu Xiu. Gu Xiu approached and she whispered a few words to him. Gu Xiu stood up with shock and admiration in his eyes. Young master, you are amazing. It's good that you know I am amazing. Learn from me. Don't come to me for everything. Young master, I will definitely do it well. But madam has said many times, all right. You go back first. When you have time, keep an eye on third brother. I suspect that what happened last time was caused by third brother. Hey, but didn't Shenjing say, can Shenjing's words be trusted? Ling Jing sneered. The most suspicious one is either first brother or third brother. Of course, second brother, fourth brother, and fifth brother can't be taken lightly. Get someone to keep an eye on them. If I don't show up, I will give these people a chance. The longer he stayed outside, the more excited those people would become. The easier it would be for him to find out their weaknesses. Yes. Gu Xiu knew that Ling Jing had made up his mind. He bowed and turned to leave. After he left, the room became quiet. Ling Jing curled his lips. Go back now? Then wouldn't his previous efforts be in vain? Su Peijian's attitude toward him had softened a lot because of her illness. Of course, he had to strike while the iron was hot. Today, he had just thought of a wonderful trick to soften Su Peijian's attitude even further. When the door opened, he looked at the time. Gu Xiu should have gone down. He usually calculated that when his subordinates came to assign work, he would never let Su Peijian meet. Seeing her enter the door, he got up to greet her. You're back. How are you feeling? You haven't recovered yet, but you still want to be strong. He took the bag from Su Peijian's hand and put it aside. He watched her take off her coat and was about to take it. Su Peijian glanced at him because of his action. It had to be said that Ling Jing had become more and more considerate these days. What's wrong? Are you really not feeling well? Do you want to see a doctor? She didn't speak, and Ling Jing looked at her worriedly. He raised his hand to her forehead. You don't have a fever? Where are you feeling unwell? Pure concern, without any utilitarian thoughts. Su Peijian could feel it. She looked into Ling Jing's extremely beautiful almond-shaped eyes. A strange feeling came over her. If there was such a man who cared about you every day when you came home, it would feel good. If that was the case, what did it matter if they got married or not? Putting aside worldly prejudices, who said that women had to get married? She could earn money by herself and buy what she wanted by herself. Even if she wanted a man, it was not difficult to spend money to buy a man's love and flattery. It sounded shocking, but how many women dreamed of such a life? Ling Jing looked at Su Peijian in a daze and knew that his strategy at this time was working. He took a step forward, turned her body around, and led her to the direction of the sofa. If you feel tired, rest. Once again, your company won't collapse without you. Su Peijian sat down, and Ling Jing sat down next to her. He wanted to continue to express his concern, but his eyes saw the necklace on Su Peijian's neck. The shape of a six-pointed star was unique and generous, inlaid with broken diamonds, looking elegant and a little delicate. He looked at Su Peijian's face and suddenly narrowed his eyes. If he remembered correctly, when he sent Su Peijian out this morning, there was nothing on her neck. With Su Peijian's personality, it was not like she would go shopping alone. Ling Jing narrowed his eyes. His intuition told him that this necklace was definitely not Su Peijian's taste. He went downstairs and got into the Cadillac. Su Peijian wanted to get out of the car, but she didn't have the chance. The car sped out of the underground parking lot like an arrow. The car moved quickly but steadily. Su Peijian's lips moved. She wanted to say something, but she gave up when she saw Ling Jing's gloomy face. She turned around and looked out of the window. The neon lights in the city were shining. She hadn't seen the stars in a long time. She didn't think there were any stars in Rome City to see. After driving for about an hour, the car stopped. Su Peijian realized that they were already in the suburbs of Rome City. She had hardly been here. She sat in the car and had no intention of getting out. She watched Ling Jing get out of the car and walk to the building in front of her. She didn't even look up. She had made up her mind. No matter what Ling Jing did, she wouldn't get out of the car. Ling Jing went and soon came back. He opened the car door and gestured for her to get out. She didn't move, so he reached out and forcibly took her out of the car. Ling Jing, the building in front of her was already dark. There was no light. But with the help of the streetlights, Su Peijian could see clearly that this was the planetarium of Rome City. She didn't know how Ling Jing did it. The door of the planetarium that had been closed was open at this time. She glanced at Ling Jing. He took her hand and led her inside. He seemed to be very familiar with this place. He led her straight inside. The lights in the planetarium were turned on. Before Su Peijian could see the environment in the planetarium clearly, he had already led her through a building. Then, after passing a large lawn, they entered another building. This building had a semicircular roof. Su Peijian entered the door and found that there was a huge, circular hall inside. On both sides of the hall, by the windows, there were astronomical telescopes with different angles. And in the middle, there was a huge telescope. The huge eye of the mirror was directly connected to the roof. It was the first time Su Peijian had seen such a huge telescope. She was stunned for a moment. Ling Jing led her to stand in front of the telescope. "Don't you want to see the stars?" Su Peijian's reaction was to look at him, then turn around and walk out without looking back. Ling Jing grabbed her body and held her in his arms. He held her with one hand to prevent her from leaving and held the telescope with the other. Come here. Ling Jing, let go of me. Come." Ling Jing reached out and adjusted the angle. Then, he let Su Peijian stand in front of him. "Look here." Su Peijian didn't move. Ling Jing was going crazy. There was no reason for her to go crazy with him. "Ling Jing, have you been crazy enough?" "No." "Don't you like the stars?" "Leave after you see them." "Crazy." Su Peijian wanted to leave, but she couldn't. She was held in Ling Jing's arms. She could only look forward and into the lens. The last time Su Peijian visited a planetarium was probably when she was in elementary school. When she traveled abroad, she used a telescope to look at the starry sky, but the things seen through a telescope were different from those seen through an astronomical telescope. The starry sky refracted by the lens was different from what she usually saw outside. It was not only beautiful, but shocking. In the vast starry sky, the earth was like a drop in the ocean. Ling Jing didn't speak again, and she didn't speak again. She stood in front of the mirror and observed the thousands of universes in the starry sky through that small lens. The feelings she felt at that moment couldn't be described in words. She didn't move. Ling Jing held her arm with his hand and leaned close to her ear. He whispered softly into her ear. "You can see more if you adjust the angle. The most obvious is Orion. You can slowly observe and see the Orion Nebula. Give it a try." Su Peijian didn't turn around. Her ear was slightly tickled by his warm breath. She resisted the urge to push him away and began to search for Orion according to his instructions. She had seen it before. She knew where Orion was. It didn't take much effort to find it. Behind her, Ling Jing circled her waist and his lips almost stuck to her ears. "The brightest star in Orion is the Beta star. Look at the brightest star. Did you see that?" Su Peijian saw it. In front of her was a vast sea of stars. Orion was indeed the brightest. "Is it beautiful?" Her earlobe was gently bitten, and she shrank her neck. She felt a shiver behind her ear, as if there was an electric current flowing through it. "Isn't it beautiful?" Su Peijian didn't say anything. She wanted him to stay away from her, but he didn't loosen his grip on her waist. "Now, look for Andromeda. Do you know where it is? Do you want me to help you look for it?" Su Peijian did not speak. She only felt the back of her ears burning. She forced herself to focus on the starry sky in front of her, and then she really found Andromeda. "Did you see a meteor? Usually, there shouldn't be many. Next time when Andromeda has a meteor shower, we can do it again." Su Peijian did not speak. She subconsciously moved her body forward, trying to distance herself from him. However, she saw a flash of light in front of her. Her eyes widened and she continued to look in shock. Soon, another one. There were really meteors? The meteors seen with a telescope were completely different from those seen with the naked eye. Su Peijian's eyes lit up for the first time since she arrived. The starry sky was indeed beautiful, and so were the meteors. Such a scene, such a night, such a beautiful scenery was brought to her by Ling Jing. I saw a meteor. She suddenly turned to look at Ling Jing. The two of them were very close, and Su Peijian's lips were pressed against Ling Jing's. She froze for a moment. The two of them had been intimate many times. Because of her kiss, Ling Jing's lips moved forward and deepened the kiss. No one cared about the starry sky anymore, and the venue was so quiet that a pin drop could be heard. In front of her was Ling Jing's enlarged face. His eyes were evil, and at this moment, they were deep. At this moment, Su Peijian clearly heard her heart skip a beat. The kiss had messed up their heartbeats and breathing. Ling Jing felt the soft body of the woman in his arms and suddenly had the idea of doing this woman on the spot. But it was just a thought. He held back. He wrapped his arms around her waist and pressed his forehead against hers. His masculine breath brushed against her face. Did you make a wish when you saw a meteor? Su Peijian did not speak. At that moment, her heartbeat was out of order, and she turned around. After a few breaths, she suppressed her emotions. That was just an accident. She no longer had the heart to look at the starry sky. Even if there were meteors, there was no way to divert the shock brought to her by the kiss just now. Illusion, it was all an illusion. It was also just a mistake. Su Peijian stared at the bright and vast starry sky. She closed her eyes. There were some things that she should make a decision about. Let's go. Let's go home. She tried to force his hand away from her waist. Ling Jing let go of his hand, but did not let her leave smoothly. Instead, he blocked her way. Don't you want to watch any more? No. Su Peijian's expression was cold. There's nothing to see. Ling Jing turned his face to look at her and wrapped his arms around her waist. Once again, she snuggled into his arms. Woman, are you always so duplicitous? Duplicitous? Why should I be duplicitous? Su Peijian removed his hand. Ling Jing, you don't need to feel so good about yourself. I think I can feel even better. He pointed at Su Peijian's heart. I heard it just now. Your heart is beating very fast. That's because you're tempted. Boring. Su Peijian waved his hand away and walked straight out. Ling Jing followed her. Don't be in such a hurry to leave. This planetarium has more than one room of astronomical telescopes. Don't you want to take a look? No, I'm not interested. But I'm interested. Ling Jing held her hand. Since we're here, we have to take a look. Otherwise, it would be a pity. Right? Ling Jing. Su Peijian stopped and looked at him very seriously. Have you always been like this? What? Su Peijian stared straight into Ling Jing's eyes, as if trying to find his hidden secret in his eyes that were as bright as stars. If she's inexperienced in the world, take her to see all the prosperity of the world. If her heart has been through the vicissitudes of life, take her to ride on a merry-go-round. If she's in love, take off your clothes. If she's seen countless people, take her to the stove. Ling Jing blinked, as if he didn't quite understand what Su Peijian meant. Su Peijian pulled out her hand and tapped Ling Jing's chest. You've been on the internet a lot, haven't you? Use different tricks to deal with different women. If you say I like stars, take me to the planetarium. If I say I like the sea, you'll definitely take me to the seaside to listen to the waves and see the sea view. Ling Jing, do you think I'll fall in love with you if you do this? Ling Jing was slightly stunned when he met Su Peijian's understanding gaze. For a moment, he almost couldn't restrain his inner admiration. However, it was only for a moment. He grew up in the Ling family, and the people in the Ling family were much more shrewd than Su Peijian. He looked at Su Peijian in shock, and there was a hint of accusation in his eyes. I don't understand what you're talking about, and I've never wanted you to fall in love with me. Because I know very well that it's impossible. He lowered his eyes, and there seemed to be a flash of sadness in them. I admit that I was indeed unhappy just now, because that necklace let me know that you probably have other suitors. It's normal for an outstanding woman like you to have suitors. But I also know what our relationship is. You're my sugar daddy, and I'm just a little boy toy that you're keeping. Our relationship isn't equal, but that doesn't affect my mood to make you happy. I hope that even if you have other suitors, you won't be in a hurry to get rid of me. Because, Ling Jing finally raised his head and looked at her with a very focused expression. Because I found that I like you. Su Peijian, I like you because you're you. Not because you're my sugar daddy, not because you can bring me benefits. You may not believe me when I say this. I've had other women before. But there's never been a woman like you, who made me work so hard to please just to make you happy. I really just want to make you happy. Even if it's just for a while. I know in my heart that our relationship is not a normal boyfriend and girlfriend. But I hope that even if we can't be together in the future, I can leave a mark in your heart. At least, I will be the unique Ling Jing. A Ling Jing who likes you, simply wants to make you happy, and wants to please you. Chapter 846. Can't I just do this? The planetarium was empty, and there was a faint echo when these words were spoken. Su Peijian's slender hands were pressed tightly against his chest. Under his chest, his heartbeat was steady and powerful, one beat after another. That drumming sound made her quickly withdraw her hand. She took a big step back, turned around, and walked out without looking back. The corners of Ling Jing's lips curled up. Looking at Su Peijian's almost fleeing figure, his heart was filled with pride. He was still very confident in his acting skills. Su Peijian, don't even think about escaping from the palm of my hand. He blinked his eyes, already making another decision in his heart. Soon, he restrained his expression and chased after Su Peijian. The cold wind was very cold. By the time Su Peijian returned home, she had almost calmed down. She went into the bathroom to take a shower, then sat back in front of the dressing table and did basic maintenance as usual. This time, Ling Jing took the initiative to step forward, took the moisturizer in her hand, and began to wipe her back. Su Peijian glanced at him through the mirror and didn't say anything. She let him carefully apply the moisturizer for her and spread it evenly. The man's palm was warm, and the strength was moderate. It was obvious that he had practiced a lot during this period of time. She looked at Ling Jing through the mirror, but he was focused on applying the moisturizer for her. His eyes were clear, and there was obviously no trace of lust. She lowered her eyes and thought of what Ling Jing had said in the planetarium just now. This person didn't speak a word of truth. She didn't believe a word of what he said. Ling Jing had already finished wiping her back and placed his chin in the pit of her neck. He looked at Su Peijian in the mirror with a focused gaze. Woman, you are so beautiful. Su Peijian was unmoved. There were too many people who praised her beauty, and she didn't feel anything when she heard it. Ling Jing put down the moisturizer in his hand, tilted his head, and kissed her cheek. Su Peijian subconsciously moved her body. Once the seed of suspicion was planted, it was not so easy to eliminate. Especially for someone like Su Peijian who had such a complicated experience. However, Ling Jing's skills were too good. During this period of time, he had also become too familiar with his body. It was easy, almost effortless, for her to provoke her response. Her body was picked up and placed on the bed. The man's chest was hot and firm, his hands deft and hot. She was dry wood, and he was the raging fire. She was the tree, and he was the vine. As for whether it was you pestering me or I pestering you, it was already unclear. When Su Peijian returned to the villa, Xiang Kaiping had not eaten yet. Seeing her come in, he stood up excitedly. Why are you back? Have you recovered from your cold? When Xiang Kaiping saw Su Peijian at home, there was surprise and joy in her eyes. Why didn't you call me to tell me that you were coming? I'll get Xiaoya to buy some groceries. Mom, don't be busy. Just eat whatever you have. Yes. I'll ask Sister Zhang to add 2 more dishes. Xiang Kaiping had started her own business and made some money. However, she had always been frugal because of her childhood habits. If Su Peijian didn't come home, she would just eat something. Su Peijian didn't stop him. She walked to the sofa and sat down. She closed her eyes and rubbed her forehead. She was actually a little annoyed. Ling Jing's recent performance had affected her originally calm heart. That kind of fluctuation was something she didn't need. A gigolo, to put it bluntly, was like a male pet. No matter how good and considerate this gigolo was to her, it was just his duty. After all, she had paid for all of this. But when she saw Ling Jing's purely flattering face and those eyes full of emotion, she actually felt a trace of guilt. She even had the mentality that if she didn't respond to him, she would be guilty. This kind of feeling was really bad, and it was also very life-threatening. Therefore, after Ling Jing gently flattered her for nearly a week, she finally decided to calm herself down first. Leaving Ling Jing and not seeing the disappointment and expectation in his eyes, she could seriously think about how to end this relationship. Do you have a lot to do at the company? Why do I think you look very tired? How are you feeling? Are you okay? You don't let me see you when you're sick, and you don't come back to let me take care of you. Child, you really make people worry too much. Mom, I'm fine. Su Peijian heard Xiang Kaiping come out and quickly sat up straight. It's just a minor illness. I've always been very healthy. I've been fine for a long time. Why do I need you to take care of me? Her daughter was being polite to her, and Xiang Kaiping didn't know what to do to make her daughter not be polite to her. You haven't come back for dinner recently, and you've lost weight. When the house over there is decorated, we'll move in. I can take care of you nearby. Okay. Su Peijian didn't object. The decoration was done quickly, and it was almost finished. However, it would take some time for the decoration to be finished. According to Su Peijian's plan, they should be able to move in the second half of the year. Xiang Kaiping glanced at her and said carefully, but if we really move there, I'm afraid some places will be very inconvenient. What's inconvenient? You and Lin Feixing. Xiang Kaiping was afraid that she would be unhappy, so her attitude was very gentle. How are you guys? I think that child is really good. He came to see me 2 days ago. He said that he heard his mother mention it once and knew that my waist is not good. So he sent some things over. Su Qingsang had bought physical therapy equipment for her before, but Su Qingsang didn't come over much after Su Peijian came out, so she sometimes didn't insist on using it. Su Qingsang had been her daughter for a few months. Su Peijian was her biological daughter. It was normal for them to care about her. However, Lin Feixing came over to take care of her and ask about her well-being. Was it because of her, an old woman? Wasn't it because of Su Peijian? I really think that he is very good. Of course, if you don't like him, I can't force you. But I really hope that you can think about what Mom said. No matter what, you have to give him a chance to try, don't you think? Su Peijian didn't say anything. Purely in terms of marriage, Lin Feixing was indeed a good choice. However, Peijian, I know that you have a knot in your heart. But this is already the case for my entire life. I just want you to be happy, and I also hope that you can be like an ordinary woman, get married, have children, and have a small family of your own. Then live a normal life. Xiang Kaiping was afraid that she would be unhappy, so she tried to persuade her. In fact, she knew that she had no right to control Su Peijian. She also knew that she could never be as close to her as she was to Li Qianxue. However, Su Peijian was her daughter. Even if they couldn't be as close as mother and daughter, she still hoped that her daughter could live a happy life, at least better than her. Mom, I got it. Su Peijian saw the hidden worry in Xiang Caiping's eyes. She couldn't tell her that she actually had no intention of falling in love with any man. Marriage or not, having children or not, were not important to her at all. However, since Xiang Kaiping was worried about this, she would let her be for once. During the morning jog, Su Peijian bumped into Lin Feixing again. Seeing her, Lin Feixing was surprised again. Peijian. Morning. The golden retriever he was holding was even happier than Lin Feixing. When it saw Su Peijian, it wanted to jump on her. Fortunately, it was still tied with the leash, so Lin Feixing held it back. I was going to look for you today. I didn't expect to meet you today. Lin Feixing looked at her with a smile. Today is the weekend. I don't work. I wonder if Peijian has any plans? How could Su Peijian not understand what Lin Feixing meant? The weather was not good today. The weather forecast said that it would rain later. She didn't plan to go out, but when she saw the anticipation in Lin Feixing's eyes, she thought of Xiang Caiping's words. In the end, she shook her head. No, I don't have any plans today. Then, can you give me some of your time? Lin Feixing looked at her with a smile in his eyes. We can do something meaningful together. Something meaningful? Su Peijian blinked. She thought that Lin Feixing was talking about their first date. After thinking for a long time, she didn't reject him. Sure. What do you want to do? I'll send Diandian back first and pick you up at your house later. What do you think? Okay. Su Peijian nodded. Since she had promised Xiang Kaiping and Lin Feixing was indeed a very suitable marriage partner, she naturally had to give her a chance. She went back to the villa and took a shower. She remembered that she was going on a date with Lin Feixing today. He picked a set of relatively formal clothes. It was a beige slim-fitting sweater skirt and a woolen jacket. She wasn't sure where Lin Feixing wanted to take her, so she picked a pair of shoes with a low heel. Such an outfit should be suitable for any occasion. When she went downstairs with her bag, Xiang Kaiping thought that she would also have to work overtime on the weekend. Not Saturday. Why are you working overtime again? I'm not working overtime. Knowing what Xiang Kaiping was thinking, Su Peijian didn't mind letting her know. I have an appointment with Lin Feixing. Mom, I probably won't be back for lunch. Okay. Hearing that Su Peijian had an appointment with Lin Feixing, Xiang Caiping's eyes lit up. Go ahead. It's okay if you don't come back for dinner. Have fun. Xiang Caiping's overjoyed expression dispelled Su Peijian's last bit of doubt. If this could make Xiang Kaiping happy, it was fine with her. When she went out, Lin Feixing was already waiting outside. He was dressed in casual clothes that didn't make people feel too formal, but it also didn't make people feel too casual. Su Peijian could tell that he wanted her to relax. Su Peijian was more or less relieved. If Lin Feixing had appeared in a suit, she would have felt more pressure. However, the moment she saw his car, Su Peijian was still stunned. What's wrong? Lin Feixing followed her gaze and looked at his Cadillac. It's just a means of transportation. My friend said that this car is not bad. It's not expensive, but it has good performance. So, after I came back, I followed his recommendation and bought this car. He didn't remember seeing Su Peijian drive when they met. Peijian, what kind of car do you like? I can get one. No, it's just a means of transportation. Anything is fine. Su Peijian shook her head. She was driving a BMW now. Xiang Kaiping had bought it for her. In fact, after she was released from prison, the car was just a means of transportation. When she saw this car, she only thought of Ling Jing. He liked this car too. It was exactly the same. Let's go then. Lin Feixing let Su Peijian get in the car. When he started the car, the speed was not fast. Have you had breakfast? Do you want me to take you to eat something first? No, I've eaten at home. Then, shall we go directly? Okay. Su Peijian didn't ask where he was going. She didn't need to. Since Lin Feixing had decided to arrange something meaningful, she believed that he would arrange it well. However, to Su Peijian's surprise, Lin Feixing actually brought her to the orphanage. When she saw the door of the orphanage, she blinked. Sorry. Lin Feixing smiled a little embarrassedly. Because I already made an appointment with the director today to come and volunteer. But I really want to go on a date with you, so I had to bring you. You won't be angry, right? No. Su Peijian had never done volunteer work before. She used to serve her sisters in prison because she was bored and wanted to find something to do. Also, she wanted to reduce her sentence. It was her first time coming to a place like this. Then, let's go in. Lin Feixing didn't come empty-handed. He had a lot of boxes in the trunk. Su Peijian took the initiative to help him and took the boxes from him. When they entered, she realized that there were food, toys, and some school supplies among the boxes. Soon, children came out. Su Peijian wanted to give the things to them directly, but Lin Feixing stopped her. That won't do. Lin Feixing blocked her hand. If we give it to them directly, it will give them the illusion that they are getting something for nothing. So, we need them to participate in the labor with us in order to get the prizes. Su Peijian didn't say anything. In the past, whether it was the Li Corporation or other companies in Lin City, doing charity was more for corporate publicity. Donating a large sum of money not only improved the corporate image, but also brought benefits to the company. She never knew that there was a way to do charity. In the following time, she followed Lin Feixing to the orphanage's car. Today, they were going to visit a farm and then work for the farm owner. The children were very enthusiastic, especially after knowing that they could get prizes if they did well. It was Su Peijian's first time doing something like this, so it was a little refreshing. However, when she entered the farm and saw the woolen coat she was wearing, she took it off without hesitation. She only wore a sweater skirt and worked with the children. Lin Feixing was called Brother Feixing, while she was called Sister Peijian. At her age, it was quite an interesting experience to be called Big Sister. After returning from the farm to the orphanage, Lin Feixing kept his promise and distributed the gifts to the children. All the children were very happy with the gifts. There were also gifts from the farm owner. In the afternoon, everyone made dinner with the fruits and vegetables they brought back from the farm. Su Peijian looked at the children who were obviously orphans, but they could still smile happily. She felt a little envious. Children's things were that simple and direct. They were happy to receive gifts, and they were happy to go out and play. Chapter 847. Just like her, for her, happiness had become a relatively luxurious thing. Apart from them, there were other volunteers who came to work that day. After dinner, they told the children to tell stories and play games. Su Peijian didn't realize that she had stayed in the orphanage for the whole day until the director said that all the children had to go to bed. It was already late at night when she came out of the orphanage. Su Peijian didn't feel tired after getting into Lin Feixing's car. Instead, she felt excited. I'm in luck today. Lin Feixing followed her into the car and glanced at her. Look, the weather forecast said it would rain, but it didn't. The event went well. Yes. Su Peijian nodded. She was indeed in luck today. Although the event had to go on in the rain, it would still affect people's mood. Peijian, do you feel bored today? No. Su Peijian didn't understand why he would have such a thought. I think it's good and meaningful. Really? Lin Feixing smiled. He looked less shrewd and more sincere. Today was our first date. I was supposed to take you shopping, to a movie, or to a French restaurant. But I made an appointment with the director, so, it really doesn't matter. Su Peijian interrupted him. It's good today. Thank you. Lin Feixing looked at the traffic light and stopped the car. He turned to look at her with a serious expression. Sorry, I don't have much experience in pursuing girls. If you think I did something wrong, you must tell me. You don't have to do that. Su Peijian was afraid that he wouldn't believe her, so she added, I'm really not angry. I think it's good this way. I've never done something like this before. It's a rare experience for me. That's good. Why did you think of volunteering? I studied in the United States. Our school gives students additional credits every year, and one of them is social service. At first, I only did these things for the credits. But later, I realized that doing these things could make people happy. Pure happiness. So when I returned to China, I tried to contact a local volunteer organization. They organize these events regularly. I think it's very meaningful. I signed up. Su Peijian nodded and looked at Lin Feixing with admiration. You are a good man. Thank you. When the signal light changed again, Lin Feixing stepped on the accelerator. I don't want that reputation of being a good person. Instead, after he started helping people, he realized that such simple happiness was much simpler than making money in the business world. That's why I tried to keep doing it. Su Peijian nodded. She looked at Lin Feixing's profile and suddenly said, next time there's an event like this, you can call me again. I'd be happy to come. Sure. Lin Feixing nodded. His eyes lit up. Not next week. If there's an event like this next time, I'll definitely invite you. Then it's a deal. Yes. Su Peijian didn't object. Such pure happiness was rare for her. She couldn't help but glance at Lin Feixing. This man was quite interesting. He had shattered her preconceived notions several times. Just because he was a traditional person, he was able to accept things that others couldn't. She had thought that he was a shrewd businessman, but he was able to bring her to do volunteer work. He was a caring person, so his character shouldn't be too bad. Su Peijian thought that maybe she could really listen to Xiang Kaiping and give Lin Feixing a chance. It could also be considered as giving herself a chance. Because she had decided to give Lin Feixing a chance, then her relationship with Ling Jing would probably be broken. Thinking of Ling Jing's face, Su Peijian hesitated for a moment. I just want to please you and make you happy. Can't I do that? Because I realize that I like you. I really like you. Su Peijian calmed herself down and shook Ling Jing's face out of her mind. He was just a pretty boy, a gangster. What did she mean by love? Even if there was real love, there would be schemes. How pure could the love of a man who was being kept by her be? She wouldn't believe a word of what he said. When it was time to make a decision, she would make a decision. There was no benefit in dragging it on. Their relationship was not normal. It wouldn't be a pity to end it. Yes, it wouldn't be a pity. Ling Jing leaned on Su Peijian, and his waist, which had been exerting force, suddenly stopped. He stared at Su Peijian's face condescendingly and found that at such a time, this damn woman was actually absent-minded. He lowered his head and bit Su Peijian's shoulder. He used extreme force with a bit of ruthlessness. Su Peijian snapped back to reality and looked at the man in front of her. Are you a dog? Woman, it seems that I didn't work hard enough today. How can you be absent-minded at such a time? Ling Jing wouldn't allow his masculine charm to be so insulted. He half-hugged Su Peijian, who had been lying on her back, and changed his position. This way, the two of them were sitting opposite each other. Su Peijian let out a low cry and looked at Ling Jing's star-like eyes, slightly gritting her teeth. Have you had enough? How can I? They hadn't seen each other for a few days. It was fine if this woman didn't show up. How could she be absent-minded at such a time? This could not be tolerated. Holding her waist tightly in his arms, he bit the place where he had just bitten. Su Peijian was in pain, but she couldn't push him away. He began to pound her body with great force. Soon, her little absent-mindedness dissipated, and there was only the wild and unrestrained but evil and charming Ling Jing in front of her, as well as the feeling he gave her. 1 week. For a whole week, Su Peijian returned to Rong Garden after work every day. She had dinner with Ling Jing. After dinner, she taught him how to operate funds, stocks, and securities. Unfortunately, that man didn't seem to be interested. Every time she taught him, he would hug her and start to mess around. Su Peijian couldn't hate him for not making progress. She will always be in his next action, into the love that he gives. On the weekend, Ling Jing said that he wanted to go out to play, and Su Peijian didn't object. Recently, she had almost fulfilled Ling Jing's requests. Ling Jing was secretly pleased to see that Su Peijian almost never refuted his requests. He thought that his confession that day had worked. Su Peijian began to have feelings for him. She had slowly begun to fall in love with him without knowing it. This knowledge made Ling Jing very happy. Several times when Gu Xiu saw him, he thought he was hallucinating. Young Master Ling was smiling so happily. Was he really not a man in love? Instead of shopping, Su Peijian and Ling Jing chose a daytime time to visit the Science and Technology Museum. Last time, Ling Jing took her to see the stars at night. She thought that as a man, he might be interested in this aspect. The two of them went to the Science and Technology Museum in Rong City and happened to meet a student from an elementary school in Rong City who was visiting today. The two adults looked particularly conspicuous among the group of children. Su Peijian felt a little uncomfortable. If she had known, she would have come on another day. However, Ling Jing didn't feel this way. No matter where he was, he looked wild and unrestrained. Even if he was stared at by many people, he could still be calm and at ease as if he was at his own home. What's wrong? Do you feel uncomfortable being stared at by the children? The two adults, squeezed in the middle of a group of children, didn't look like teachers. Ling Jing raised the corners of his lips and moved closer to Su Peijian's ear with a playful smile. TSK. Do you want me to make them not dare to stare at us? What are you doing? Don't mess around. Su Peijian glared at him. This person never played by the rules. Seeing that Ling Jing was about to move closer to kiss her, Su Peijian quickly avoided him. Stop it, they are all children. Don't teach them bad things. Tisk, Ling Jing stopped kissing her and suddenly moved closer to her face. So caring? Why? Do you want to have your own child? Boring. Su Peijian didn't look at him and walked past him. The two of them avoided the children in the hall and walked to the branch inside. That way, they missed the children. In the past few years, China's science and technology had developed quite well, and the construction of the Science and Technology Museum was very unprecedented. Su Peijian walked inside, and Ling Jing held her hand. Su Peijian had seen some of the technology in the media, and some she hadn't. At first, she just wanted to go on a date with Ling Jing. But when she really came in, she was interested. She thought of the children in the orphanage. For those children, they might not have visited such a venue. If it was possible, she could bring those children here next time. If she really wanted to come, she had to tell the orphanage. She also had to arrange for the Science and Technology Museum. Su Peijian was thinking about it in her heart, but her wrist suddenly tightened. Then, she was quickly pulled into someone's arms. The sudden change made her look up and find that Ling Jing was holding her tightly in his arms, and at the same time, he was staring at her unhappily. Don't you look where you are walking? Su Peijian was stunned for a moment. She looked back and found that there was a step in front of her. She didn't pay attention just now and almost stepped on it. What are you thinking about? Ling Jing found that she had been distracted a lot these days. Nothing. It was indeed rare for her to find happiness again after she came out of prison. Last time, she helped to do volunteer work and simply got along with the children. To her, it was very interesting and meaningful. She wasn't watching Lin Feixing do it, but she realized that there were some things she could do. Be careful. Ling Jing glared at him fiercely. Su Peijian looked up at him. Although he was fierce, there was a hint of concern in his eyes. Her lips slightly pressed into a straight line. Su Peijian gently broke away from his hand, turned around, and continued to walk forward. Ling Jing looked at her profile, quickly caught up with her, and reached out to hold her hand. Su Peijian tried to break free, but she didn't succeed. In the end, she let him be. This silent indulgence made the smile on Ling Jing's face even brighter. He looked at Su Peijian and knew that this woman was about to fall into his arms. As for falling in love with him, wasn't that a matter of time? It was already noon when the two of them came out of the Science and Technology Museum. It was very far from the city, and there weren't many high-end restaurants. Ling Jing looked around and took out his phone app to search. There's a farmhouse nearby. Do you want to go there? Farmhouse? Su Peijian frowned slightly, but Ling Jing didn't give her a chance to regret. He took her to the car and went directly to the place, he said. It really was a farmhouse. It was a small courtyard, and the rooms inside had been changed into private rooms. There were 3 floors in total, and the rooms on each floor had a nickname. The names were a little tacky, such as blooming flowers, wealth, and happiness. Seeing this, Su Peijian wanted to back out. However, Ling Jing was very interested. He took Su Peijian to a private room on the 2nd floor, called Blooming Flowers and Growing Stalks. Looking at the 4 words, Ling Jing raised his eyebrows and looked at her with a playful expression. Are we considered to be blooming flowers and growing stalks? Su Peijian ignored him. She wasn't picky now. If he wanted to eat, she would accompany him. To Su Peijian's surprise, the environment inside was actually good. It was very clean, and although the decoration was a little tacky, the layout was reasonable. The boss entered the door and told them what the main ingredients and special dishes were today. He said that they had wild animals like rabbits and pheasants here. After hearing the boss mention a certain ingredient, Ling Jing clicked his tongue. Let's have dragon and phoenix soup. He turned to look at Su Peijian. You should have eaten it before, right? But I think it should be different in this kind of place. Su Peijian knew what dragon and phoenix soup was. The Li family's diet was light, and she didn't eat everything. Seeing that Ling Jing was so interested, she didn't refute again. The pride and certainty in Ling Jing's eyes deepened. Because it was the weekend, there were many people in the farmhouse, and the private room next door was a little noisy. The soundproofing here was not very good. Su Peijian frowned slightly, but in the end, she endured it. Ling Jing seemed to know what she was thinking. He sat down next to her and put one hand around her waist. Never been to this kind of place? Bear with it. I've actually never been here either. Su Peijian glanced at him, obviously not believing him. Ling Jing was not satisfied with her suspicious look, so he leaned over and kissed her on the cheek. What's with that look? I said I've never been here, so I've never been here. Don't touch me. Although the door of the private room was closed, it was not locked. Who knew if someone would come? I didn't touch you. I moved my mouth. Ling Jing was addicted to teasing her and wanted to kiss her face again. Su Peijian was annoyed. She didn't like to do these intimate actions outside. Are you going to let go or not? Don't be so serious. You're always so serious. How boring life is. Ling Jing pressed her face against hers. To be a man is to have fun while you can. Isn't it? Su Peijian reached out to push him, and there were footsteps outside. Ling Jing didn't go too far. He let go of her when he heard the sound. When he let go, he didn't forget to tease her again. Woman, go back and continue. Su Peijian ignored this and pretended not to hear it. If she argued with a hooligan like Ling Jing, she would be the one who would be angry in the end. The dishes were served, and Ling Jing served her a bowl of soup very attentively. Try it. This is the best for you women. It's a great tonic. The first part of the sentence sounded okay, but the second part sounded strange. Su Peijian couldn't help but look at Ling Jing. He spread his hands. Did I say something wrong? You have to know that your physical strength is really poor. Seeing Su Peijian frown, he lowered his voice a little. You see, every time I don't arrive, you can't do it. If this isn't poor physical strength, what is it? Su Peijian couldn't listen to it anymore. The education she had received since she was a child made it impossible for her to make such a lewd joke like other women. She was so serious, but Ling Jing wasn't annoyed. Drink more. Su Peijian ignored him and picked up the soup to taste. Surprisingly, the taste was actually not bad. Ling Jing had been looking at her the whole time. The look in his eyes was somewhat sharp, like a cheetah looking at its prey. Su Peijian turned a blind eye to his gaze. There was only so much time left. Now, no matter what Ling Jing wanted to do or what he wanted, it was only for this period of time. When the time was up, this relationship would end. Su Peijian thought very well. In fact, in the following period of time, Lin Feixing happened to be busy and went on 2 business trips. This also gave her time to accompany Ling Jing and end their relationship. 2 weeks later, Lin Feixing returned from his business trip. The first thing he did was to call her and ask her out. When she received Lin Feixing's call, Su Peijian had just woken up. She was in the kitchen making breakfast for herself. Ling Jing had already woken up and was washing up in the bathroom. Su Peijian hung up the phone and looked at the toast in the oven in a daze, but only for a moment. Soon, she continued what her hands were doing. Today was the day to end everything. When Ling Jing came out, Su Peijian had already made 2 breakfasts and placed one in front of Ling Jing. Thank you. Ling Jing smiled very brightly. The weather had warmed up a lot. He casually put on a casual t-shirt. Because he had just washed his face, a few strands of hair on his forehead were slightly damp and hung down slightly messily, adding a bit of an unruly feeling to him. When he smiled, his pair of almond-shaped eyes would rise up, with a little smile in his eyes, looking evil and charming. Su Peijian lowered her eyes and ate quietly. She had already started to organize the words in her mind. It's very delicious. In fact, it was just a simple sandwich, but Ling Jing ate it like a Manchu Han imperial feast. Woman, your cooking is getting better and better. This kind of breakfast could be praised like this by him. It was really. Su Peijian glanced at him, picked up the milk in front of her, and drank it in one gulp. She took out a tissue and gently wiped the corner of her mouth. When she put down the tissue, Su Peijian had already prepared it. Ling Jing. Yes? Thank you for all this time. Woman, did you suddenly realize that I am a very good lover? Yes. Su Peijian did not deny this. No matter what the purpose of Ling Jing's kindness and gentleness towards her was, he was indeed a perfect lover. You are a very good lover. Ling Jing's performance in the past half a month flashed through her mind, as well as Ling Jing's performance when she was sick. The way he smiled, the way he was moved, and the way he said he liked her. Her heart slightly palpitated, but it was only for a moment, but Su Peijian suppressed that emotion. So? Ling Jing's voice was a bit expectant. Quickly say that you love me. Say that you can't extricate yourself from me. When she said that she loved him, he would definitely trample on her dignity and let this woman know that he, young Master Ling, was not so easy to mess with. Chapter 848. The dining room was very quiet, and the aroma of food still floated in the air. The smile on Ling Jing's face froze. He looked at Su Peijian and only realized what she was talking about after a few seconds. Woman, what are you talking about? He gritted his teeth slightly. I said, let's end it. As Su Peijian spoke, she took out the card she had prepared for a long time from her pocket and pushed it in front of Ling Jing. There are 2 million in this. 1 million is what we agreed on. And 1 million is the money I promised to invest for you. The golden card was placed in front of Ling Jing. He looked at the card and then at Su Peijian in front of him. The other party's calm tone almost made him want to go berserk. Woman, this isn't what we agreed on before. Ling Jing's fists unconsciously clenched. Didn't you say that you want me to accompany you for half a year? It was only 3 months now, and there was still a long time in between. Yes. I said so before. But, I'm tired now. Tired? Ling Jing narrowed his eyes with a storm in his eyes. You said you're tired? Yes. Su Peijian nodded. I'm tired. So let's end it. It wasn't a discussion or a question. There wasn't even an explanation. Su Peijian unilaterally ended this relationship. Woman. I'll give you a chance to reorganize your words. There was a hint of anger in his low voice. Anyone who knew Ling Jing knew that he was on the verge of losing his temper. I'm tired. Let's end it. Su Peijian stood up and looked at the card. You should be happy that you got the reward you deserve in a shorter time. So, I don't think you have anything to be angry about. Ling Jing didn't say anything. He just stared at Su Peijian. His heart was experiencing a storm. The Su Peijian in front of him made him have a moment of impulse to tear her apart. Many ruthless and dark thoughts surged out uncontrollably at this moment. As the young master of the Ling family, even if there were 5 brothers above him, none of them could shake his position. Who knew how many people outside would be afraid when they heard his name? The damn woman in front of him first treated him as a little gangster, a gigolo to support him. Then, she took advantage of him a few more times, treating him like a male pet and ignoring him. Now, it was even more powerful. It could come and go as it pleased. Good, very good. After all, he was the young master of the Ling family. The angrier he was, the calmer his expression was. His thoughts changed almost instantaneously. He wanted to grind Su Peijian's bones into ashes and make this woman beg him one day. He wanted to conquer this woman and make her beg for mercy. Several thoughts flashed through his mind, but his eyes never left Su Peijian. He stared at Su Peijian in a daze. His expression was one of shock, astonishment, and disbelief. The last thing that came to mind was that he was injured. He stared at Su Peijian with his clear and seductive almond-shaped eyes. He didn't say a word. In fact, his silence was more effective than his words. Su Peijian was used to being cold-hearted. She was also prepared that Ling Jing would make a noise and even quarrel with her. She had even thought of a countermeasure. However, Ling Jing's performance in front of her was completely out of her imagination. She suddenly felt a rare sense of guilt. But even though she felt guilty, she would not change her mind again. She stood up and pushed the card closer to Ling Jing. If you don't have a place to live in this house, you can stay here for the time being. You can move when you find a place. But, I won't come back again. After saying this, she was about to go back to her room to change her clothes and go out. Her wrist tightened, and she turned her head to look at Ling Jing. He was also looking at her. His gaze was full of hurt. Don't you have any meaning to us during this period of time? As he spoke, he stood up, grabbed her wrist, and trapped her between his body and the dining table. He lowered his head, and his almond-shaped eyes, which had always been bright, were now full of hurt. What do my feelings and feelings mean to you? It wasn't a question, but an extremely sad question. Su Peijian didn't dare to look at him for a moment. Ling Jing, don't be like this. It's useless. How can it be useless? Ling Jing reached out and pointed at her heart. I like you. I'm serious about liking you. But I don't like you. Su Peijian finally looked at him. There was no expression or reaction in her slightly cold eyes. Su Peijian, I don't like you. I didn't like you in the past, I don't like you now, and I probably won't like you in the future. Why? Was he not handsome? Or was he not good enough to her? This was the first time he had been so calculative for this woman. Yes, although it was calculative, his kindness to her was real. When did he, the dignified young Master Ling, care for a woman? When did he care for a woman's feelings? Damn woman. It really made people want to beat her up. There is no why. Su Peijian's expression was cold. If I don't like you, I don't like you. If I don't love you, I don't love you. Why do you care so much? Good. What a good reason. Ling Jing narrowed his eyes. He was still trying to control himself. He suddenly reached out and pulled Su Peijian into his arms. He hugged her so tightly that it was as if he was trying to fuse her body into his. But, I like you. Su Peijian. I like you. I really like you. I don't want you to respond. I also said that I don't even need your response. I just want to spend more time with you, can't I? Even so, can't I? You're the one who said 6 months. But now you're breaking the contract. Su Peijian, do you have to do this to me? His huge anger made his body tremble. Su Peijian felt his trembling. She frowned slightly. She raised her hand behind Ling Jing's back, but in the end, she put it down and gently pushed him away. Ling Jing hugged her tightly, not giving her a chance at all. Su Peijian took a deep breath. Ling Jing, let go of me. It's meaningless for you to do this. I don't want to let go. Ling Jing hugged her waist tightly and refused to let go. Ling Jing, let go of me. Su Peijian stubbornly pushed Ling Jing away, this time with more force than before. It also made her succeed. She took a step to the side and looked at him expressionlessly. Ling Jing, leave everyone some dignity. Let's end it like this. After saying this, she didn't look at Ling Jing anymore. She turned around and entered the room. Chapter 849. What happened? Lin Feixing looked at Su Peijian, who was in front of him, and found that she seemed to be distracted. Is the food not to your liking? This restaurant is very classy, as a second date for 2 people. It took Lin Feixing a long time to decide on this location. It was also very close to Su Peijian's company. It happened to be in the downtown business district. After dinner, we can go watch a movie together or something. Lin Feixing had already made up his mind, but in the middle of the meal, he realized that Su Peijian was daydreaming. Su Peijian glanced at Lin Feixing and shook her head gently. Sorry, I just thought of something. The food was good. It suits my taste. You're considerate. She remembered that when she changed her clothes and was about to go out in the morning, Ling Jing still maintained that posture in the dining room. His head was lowered. She couldn't see his expression clearly, but she could feel the low pressure around Ling Jing. She didn't feel that she had done anything wrong. The transaction was settled. Ling Jing did not suffer any losses. After all, she had given him the money. Moreover, they had agreed from the start, so she didn't think that she had done anything wrong. Su Peijian couldn't help but feel a little uncomfortable when she thought about how sad Ling Jing was and how he was trembling when he hugged her. When she met Lin Feixing's gaze, she smiled. Thank you, I like it very much. Since the decision was made, there was no need to hesitate. If one does not act decisively, one will fall into chaos. Peijian, how about we go to the movies after dinner? After saying this, Lin Feixing smiled awkwardly. Sorry, I still don't know what you like, so I can only say this. If you have other plans, I can go with you to do what you like. It's okay. Let's just watch the movie. Su Peijian didn't mind. She smiled at Lin Feixing and took out her phone to book a ticket. She looks down and concentrates on eating the food in front of her, but Ling Jing's face flashes in her mind again. He said that he would take her to the movies and let her accompany him, but in the end, that guy fell asleep in the cinema. She tightened her grip on the chopsticks and closed her eyes. This was the last time he thought of Ling Jing. A hooligan and a pretty boy really weren't worth spending too much effort on. The atmosphere in the living room of the villa was extremely low. Not to mention Shen Lefyu, who was standing next to the coffee table, who was too scared to speak. The bodyguards on both sides were silent. Even Gu Xiu, who had always been close to Ling Jing, did not dare to make a sound. Ling Jing looked at the information in front of her. The information was very detailed. After all, his request to the ancient cultivators back then was to investigate everything, no matter how big or small. The ancient cultivator actually did listen to him. The information in his hands couldn't be any more detailed. That woman had broken up with him 3 days ago. Then, he turned around and went on a date with Lin Feixing, who looked more like a gigolo than him. Flying star? Stars? Hee hee. The necklace was a gift from Lin Feixing. Do you like stars? Ling Jing's knuckles turned white as she held the documents in her hand. A trace of bloodlust flashed across his eyes, but it quickly disappeared. He raised his head and looked at Gu Xiu. His expression was unexpectedly calm. Check if there are any people or companies that are cooperating with Shenzhen department store. Check all of them. I want to see it in 3 hours. Yes. Gu Xiu didn't understand why his young lord was acting so crazy. But young master had orders. As a subordinate, he could only obey. It didn't need 3 hours. It was such a simple matter. 2 hours later, Gu Xiu once again put a new investigation information in front of Ling Jing. He was hugging Shenlefu. He was eating the grapes that she had peeled and fed to his mouth. Shenlefu was respectful and afraid of him, carefully trying to please him. Her eyes were a little pleading. Young Master Ling, I can promise you anything. Can you let my brother go? My brother's body really can't take it anymore. Really, what? Ling Jing lifted her chin, his expression was light and slutty. You just fed me a few grapes, and you want me to let your brother go? Young Master Ling? Ling Jing looked at Gu Xiu, who was standing on the side, reached out and rubbed her chest. If you want me to let your brother go, it depends on how much you can do. Shenlefu bit her lip. She was no longer an ignorant little girl. Especially after coming here for these days, she saw with her own eyes how Ling Jing treated traitors. Her little face was pale, and she looked delicate and pitiful. Ling Jing, however, was not in the mood to look at her and pushed her away. He stood up and looked at her with some pity. If you want to get something, you have to pay. Think about it carefully. Anyway, your brother won't die for a while. His extremely cold tone made Shenlefu's face turn pale again. Ling Jing was not in the mood to appreciate it. He stood up and took the information in Gu Xiu's hand. The department store that Xiang Kaiping left to Su Peijian was originally called Qing Qing Department Store. After Su Peijian took over, Xiang Kaiping took the initiative to change the name to Xinjiang Department Store. TSK. No matter which name it was, the name was extremely tacky. She despised it in her heart. Thinking of the ruthlessness in Su Peijian's eyes that day, Ling Jing once again had the urge to kill. After calming down, he felt that this game could be played again. After going through all the relationships, he finally glanced at Gu Xiu. Gu Xiu felt a bit scared under her gaze, and his body shrank back a little. Young master. Ling Jing randomly took out 2 pieces of information in his hand and turned to Gu Xiu. By these 2 companies. Gu Xiu glanced at such a small company. Young Master Ling, is it necessary? When he met Ling Jing's almost murderous gaze, he took the information in her hand. Yes. I'll do it right away. You have 3 days to get this done. And Ling Jing narrowed her eyes. No one knew what she was thinking, but there was a flash of bloodthirst in her eyes. Buy me a house. 1 bedroom and 1 living room. The older one, the smaller one. The price should be less than 2 million. Young Master Ling? He already had enough houses under his name. What the hell was 1 bedroom and 1 living room? It was not even enough for the nanny at home. Go quickly. I'll give you a week to do all the things I just told you. Yes. Gu Xiu never questioned Ling Jing's decision. He bowed and turned to leave. Ling Jing threw the information in front of her aside. Her eyes were like a cheetah waiting for an opportunity in the dark. Woman. I spent so much time and so much money to play with you. You should really be touched and honored. It was not too late to taste the fruit of victory, as long as there was that day. And he almost couldn't wait. Su Peijian looked at the form in front of her, raised her eyebrows, and looked at Manager Wang in front of her. Well, it was a coincidence that the company had a new purchasing manager, still surnamed Wang. However, he was younger than the previous one, in his 30s. He was quite capable. But sometimes he was a little indecisive. What does this report mean? The two downstream companies that had been working with suddenly wanted to raise the price. Business was not doing well now. For these downstream companies, it was rare for them to suddenly adjust the price without any major changes. These two companies were the ones that they had been working with a lot recently. Last month, they even helped to do a promotion together, and the response was good. Unexpectedly, they wanted to adjust the price now. According to this ratio, not only would their profits fall even lower, but it would also affect their perception in the hearts of customers. Mr. Su, those two companies seemed to have just changed bosses. Then they said that the price adjustment was the new boss's idea. Change of boss? Su Peijian frowned slightly. After thinking for a while, she knocked on the table and looked at Zhou Mei. Help me make an appointment with the people in charge of these two companies. Yes. Zhou Mei nodded and turned to contact them. Su Peijian did not take this matter to heart. The new boss did not know the industry, so it was normal for him to want to adjust the price. She made an appointment to see if they could negotiate. If they could, they would. If not, she did not mind changing to another company. Business was difficult now. If she wanted to cooperate, the company had to agree. She did not like people threatening her. 2 days later, Su Peijian met one of the people in charge of a private restaurant. The man looked to be in his 40s. His figure was well managed, but he was a little chubby and had a small belly. He looked friendly when he smiled, but the look in his eyes was different. Su Peijian quickly guessed what kind of negotiation tactics he would use later from the man's appearance and the way he spoke. The man's surname was Ying, and his name was Ying Tianlong. The first thing he did was to introduce himself. He said that he was originally a nouveau riche. After buying and making money, he did not know what he was doing. People said that there were risks in real estate and the stock market, but he wanted to do business. He bought this company with the intention of making money, so it was necessary to raise the price. The man's words were not very technical. His whole person revealed that although he was unsophisticated, he was rich. He felt that he was willful because he was rich. There was no such person in the circle that Su Peijian had interacted with before. This was a rare experience for her. The man did not come alone. He brought a female secretary with him. She said that she was a secretary, but her words were coquettish and seductive. She leaned against Ying Tianlong as if she had no bones. She looked at Zhou Mei beside her and was glad that Zhou Mei was not like this. Otherwise, she would let Zhou Mei go home and eat her up. Zhou Mei seemed to know what she meant and smiled at her. It was obvious that the person in front of her was relatively simple. Su Peijian did not want to beat around the bush. President Ying, I understand that you want to make money after buying the company, but everything has to be reasonable. We signed a contract before. If you suddenly change your mind like this, it will be considered a breach of contract. What breach of contract? Don't scare me. The person who signed the contract with you is the person from the previous company, not me. Besides, our contract expires in a month. It's natural for me to raise the price. Su Peijian listened to the other party say the same thing and lost her patience, right? Okay, President Ying, you mean that you have to raise the price and you don't intend to take back the idea, right? That's for sure. As Ying Tianlong spoke, his phone rang. The secretary stood up. President Ying, I'm going to take the call. Go. Come back early. Ying Tianlong touched the secretary's waist in front of Su Peijian. Su Peijian could not bear it and turned her face away. The secretary twisted her waist and left. Not long after, Zhou Mei's phone also rang. What was wrong with these people today? She glanced at Zhou Mei and picked up the phone awkwardly. I'm sorry, President Su. It's okay. Su Peijian did not like to be interrupted when talking about business. Zhou Mei stood up to answer the phone. Su Peijian wanted to continue, but Zhou Mei rushed in again. She approached Su Peijian and her voice was trembling. President Su, my child suddenly fell. I want to go to the hospital now. Su Peijian saw the anxious look on her face and did not make things difficult. Go. But here, it's okay. The child is more important. She was not an unreasonable person. Moreover, she had a hunch that the negotiation would probably not go through today. Therefore, she did not plan to stay long. After confirming Ying Tianlong's thoughts, she would leave. Zhou Mei looked at her gratefully and then left in a hurry. Ying Tianlong's secretary had not returned yet. Only the two of them were left in the private room. Su Peijian looked at him again with a calm expression. President Ying, a straightforward person does not resort to insinuations. I am a straightforward person. I just want to ask, are you sure there is no room for negotiation? President Su, don't be so serious. It's not that there is no room for negotiation. Ying Tianlong glanced at Su Peijian. Of course, I have to give you face when such a beautiful lady comes to talk about cooperation with me. How about this, you drink with me, and I won't raise the price. How about that? Hearing this, Su Peijian did not want to talk at all. In that case, there is nothing to talk about. The two companies cooperated on an equal footing. She was not an escort. Many years ago, Su Qinghui had taught her that one must not be arrogant, but one must have pride. When it came to cooperation, it would work out. If it didn't work out, she did not want to continue. Unexpectedly, when she wanted to leave, the other party grabbed her hand and pulled her into his arms. President Su, you are really beautiful. You even outshine my secretary. Actually, you are such a beautiful lady. Why do you have to work so hard to talk about business? What are you doing? Let go. Su Peijian's eyes were cold and fierce. Ying Tianlong fearlessly leaned over. Don't shout so loudly. Let me tell you, as long as you are willing to work with me, don't mention lowering the price. I will even give it to you for free. President Ying, I will say it again, let go. Su Peijian tried to push him, but he was a man after all, and he was quite strong. He hugged her and refused to let go. His hands were still touching her back. I have never played with a beauty like President Su. You have personality, I like it. President Su, you are with me. Seeing that he was about to kiss her, Su Peijian raised her hand and slapped his face without thinking. Ying Tianlong was slapped by her and was instantly furious. He hugged her tightly and refused to let go. *tch, I gave you face, but you don't want it. Let me tell you. It's your fortune that I like you. Be good to me, or else. With the other party's size and strength, Su Peijian struggled, but it was very difficult. She kicked and kicked, using the self-defense skills she had learned before. Ying Tianlong didn't succeed so easily. He took a few hits and didn't gain any advantage, but he was also angry because of this. He became even crazier and pressed Su Peijian onto the chair. He reached out to tear her clothes. The strength of a man and a woman showed a huge difference at this time. When the other party's hand reached for the collar of her clothes, Su Peijian finally couldn't help but feel a trace of panic. *tch, I will teach you a good lesson. I will let you know how powerful I am. Su Peijian reached out to take the phone in her pocket, but before she could get it, a few buttons on her shirt had been torn off by the other party. Help! Su Peijian didn't have time to get the phone, so she screamed in despair. She hoped that someone outside the room could hear her cry for help. The man's hand was already touching her collarbone. Su Peijian was so disgusted that she wanted to vomit. In the next second, the gravity on her body disappeared. She didn't have time to see what was in front of her at all. She saw Ng Tianlong's somewhat fat body being lifted up and then thrown out. After the sound of landing and smashing into the chair, there was the sound of fists landing on Ng Tianlong's body. One punch after another, Ng Tianlong let out a squeal like a pig being slaughtered. Su Peijian was still in shock. She, who had escaped from danger, now saw clearly who the person was. Ling Jing. Bastard, who told you to touch my woman? Ling Jing not only punched, but also kicked. After a few punches and kicks, Ng Tianlong's face became like a pig's head. In the end, when Ng Tianlong dodged, he didn't know if he hit the corner of the table or the chair, but he directly fainted. However, Ling Jing didn't think it was enough. She raised her foot and wanted to hit him again. Su Peijian stopped him. Enough. She stood up and felt the coldness in her chest. She lowered her head and tightened her shirt in the middle. She found that the button had fallen off, and there was no way to fix it. She picked up the coat beside her and put it on, covering her chest. She heard footsteps outside and went forward to stop Ling Jing from continuing to beat him. Stop hitting him. If you continue, someone will die. Ling Jing glanced at her. When she saw her messy hair and clothes, a ruthless look appeared in her eyes again. She raised her foot and kicked Ng Tianlong a few more times. At that moment, Ng Tianlong's secretary came in and saw the situation in front of her. Su Peijian held her forehead. Ling Jing didn't care. He directly went forward to put his arm around her waist and led her outside. The secretary was so scared that her face turned pale. She didn't stop them and just watched them leave. By the time Su Peijian got into Ling Jing's Cadillac, her rationality had returned, and she calmed down. She tightened her coat and glanced at Ling Jing. The panic of almost being violated finally dissipated, and another question came to her mind. Why are you here? She was very calm. She didn't lose her usual rational analysis just because Ling Jing saved her. Ling Jing didn't answer her question. Instead, he approached her and held her shoulders with both hands. Are you okay? Are you hurt anywhere? Did that beast hurt you? Su Peijian was stunned for a moment. When she saw the pure concern in Ling Jing's eyes, she spoke again. I'm fine. You didn't say anything. Why are you here? Ling Jing's expression was a little embarrassed, and a little uncomfortable. He retracted his hand, as if he didn't know how to answer this question. Su Peijian looked at him and suddenly realized something. It had been a month since she unilaterally announced that the two of them were over. In this month, she didn't not think about Ling Jing, but she suppressed it. In fear of meeting Ling Jing, she didn't even return to Rong Garden once in this month. Now that she saw Ling Jing again, she realized that something had happened to her, but Ling Jing could immediately appear. What did this mean? Yes. I followed you. Ling Jing openly admitted what he had done. Su Peijian didn't expect him to say that. She was stunned. I followed you. Ling Jing spoke again. This time, he looked even more embarrassed. I can't forget you. He didn't look into Su Peijian's eyes. Instead, he slightly turned his face to look at an unknown point. Even if you don't want me, I can't forget you. You breached the contract. You clearly said that it would be half a year. But you abandoned me in advance. But I can't forget you. He suddenly raised his head and looked at Su Peijian. I miss you very much. The car wasn't big, and only the light from the street lamps outside shone in. It was dim and hazy. The young man with a devilish appearance was like a little boy who had his first awakening of love. He looked at her with a very sincere and devout gaze and told her that he liked her. The throbbing that Su Peijian had deliberately suppressed in the deepest part of her heart seemed to show signs of revival at this time. Su Peijian pursed her lips into a straight line. She didn't like this idea. Ling Jing, I said that we're over. Yes. We're over. Ling Jing looked at her with a bitter face. I know that I don't deserve you. I also know that you won't like me. But how can people control things in love? Su Peijian didn't speak. She had never really fallen in love with someone. She didn't know that kind of feeling. At first, she got engaged to Qiu Yanba because their family conditions were similar and their identities were suitable. Later, she got engaged to Hui Yifan because they used each other and exchanged interests. After she got out of prison, her mentality was no longer the same as before. What was love to her? She didn't know what it felt like to love someone. She used to have a family that she loved dearly, but later she realized that those family members didn't belong to her. She lost her family and almost gave up everything in the first half of her life. Now, there was a person who looked into her eyes and made such a serious confession. She couldn't tell what she felt in her heart and didn't know how to respond. In the end, she could only turn her face away. She didn't speak, and Ling Jing directly started the car. Su Peijian sat there and didn't speak. Soon, she realized that this wasn't the way to Rome Garden. She glanced at Ling Jing but didn't ask where he planned to take her. The car soon stopped in a relatively old neighborhood. Ling Jing got out of the car and glanced at her. His eyes were a little perturbed, a little uneasy, and a little uncertain. Su Peijian met his eyes, pursed her lips, and got out of the car. There was almost no parking space in the neighborhood, so the car had to be parked outside. They walked into the neighborhood for a while. The shabby neighborhood had a few sparse trees, which could be considered greenery. They walked around a flower bed that didn't look beautiful, and Ling Jing took her into the door of one of the buildings. The iron door was a little old. After entering the door, she found that not only was it old, but there was also no elevator. The two of them went upstairs together. Su Peijian was wearing high heels and stepping on the stairs. The sound of her footsteps sounded very loud in the dark. She couldn't help but want to walk softly, but it was a little difficult. Chapter 850. The door closed behind her, and the scene in front of her was reflected in her eyes. Su Peijian hadn't seen such a small house for a long time. The design was clear at a glance, with one bedroom and one living room. On the right was a small dining table that occupied a small part of the living room. On the left was a sofa that looked a little old, but fortunately, it was clean. The coffee table was a little old-fashioned, with a box of tissues and a few magazines on it. The bathroom and the room were visible at a glance. Su Peijian had never been to such a place. When she was in the Li family, her bathroom was already this big. She was looking at the environment in front of her and didn't notice the disgust in Ling Jing's eyes when he saw this place. For young Master Ling, Su Peijian's two-bedroom apartment was already small and uncomfortable. This one bedroom and one living room was even more unbearable for him. But he had no choice. The housing prices in Rome City were very high now. 2 million in the city center could only buy such a small place. He couldn't let Su Peijian suspect him, so he had to suffer. When he turned to face Su Peijian, the corners of his mouth rose as if he wanted to smile, but he restrained his smile and became a little uneasy. I bought this place with your 2 million. Su Peijian was stunned for a moment. She looked up at Ling Jing, not expecting him to really listen to her and use the money to buy a house. I did everything you asked me to do. Ling Jing stood in front of her and looked at her carefully. I also went to look for a job this month. But, you know, it's not easy for me to find a job. So. But don't worry, I went to interview for a warehouse keeper yesterday. The boss said he wanted me, and I can go to work in a few days. He said in a very happy tone and looked at Su Peijian with a happy expression, like a child waiting for praise. His phoenix eyes were obviously evil, but at this time, he was as pure as a child. Su Peijian's heart felt like it was struck by an electric shock. She didn't speak, just looked at Ling Jing in silence for a long time. Patient. Ling Jing took a step forward and held her hand with a sincere and focused expression. I listened to you. Trust me, really. Her heart began to beat erratically again. Su Peijian looked at Ling Jing in front of her and didn't pull her hand back. Ling Jing, this is useless. She forced herself to harden her heart, pulled her hand away, forced herself not to look at him. She couldn't let Xiang Kaiping worry anymore. Xiang Caiping's life was full of ups and downs. She now hoped that she could find a man, start a family, get married, and have children. She could not, then how can it be useful? Tell me. Ling Jing pulled her hand again. This time, he looked much more eager than before. Tell me, how can it be useful? Tell me. I can do it. After saying this, his expression changed slightly and became somewhat embarrassed. Of course, I know that I might not be able to do what you did. But I can take it slow. You see, I'm still young, there will always be a chance, right? Su Peijian didn't know what to say. The man's palm was so warm that it was boiling hot. The Ling Jing in front of him was irresistible. She could say cold words, she could put on a cold attitude. But she could hear her own heartbeat even better. Again and again, like the beating of a drum. That was the sound of his heart beating. She didn't know who started what happened next. In a small room, the bed was not big. The two of them rolled around in a ball. His clothes were taken off one by one, and her body was measured inch by him. His wheat-colored skin was firm and strong. Her fair shoulder bones seemed to have been cut. A man and a woman. They communicated in the most primitive and simple way. There was no unnecessary nonsense, only each other's breath, each other's temperature. There was me in you, and you in me. In a daze, Su Peijian looked at Ling Jing's enlarged face in front of her. She closed her eyes and emptied her mind. Forget it, just take it as one last indulgence. After tonight, she would get everything back on track. At dawn, Su Peijian woke up from the bed and found that Ling Jing was still asleep. She stared at his sleeping face for a long time, then finally closed her eyes, got out of bed, and put on her clothes again. The buttons on her shirt had been torn yesterday. She couldn't wear it back. Looking at Ling Jing, who was still sleeping, she walked to his wardrobe, trying to find one of his clothes to put on first. However, she saw a few pieces of clothes she had left in Rome Garden. Those clothes were all hers, and she had worn them before. She stood in front of the small wardrobe and was a little dazed for a moment. Ling Jing woke up at this time, walked behind her, and wrapped his arms around her. Sorry, I was a thief. She couldn't move. The two of them had just slept with each other yesterday, and today she was treating him coldly. She could have felt no guilt, but now she felt that she had gone too far. This was a rare emotion, so she didn't break free from him. I came out when you asked me to. If you said you wanted to separate, I left. But I missed you. Ling Jing hugged her waist and pressed his chin against her neck. I went back a few times, and you didn't remove my fingerprints. I was so happy. I thought you still remembered me. But you never came back. I missed you a lot. So, I became a thief and stole your clothes. That way, when you were not here, I could still see your clothes. I pretended that you were here too. His hand was pressed against her heart. Their skin touched. Su Peijian blinked and suddenly didn't know what to say. Her body was turned by him, and he hugged her tightly and kissed her hard. Intense and crazy. After the kiss, both of their breaths were a little unstable. Su Peijian cleared her throat and said in a low voice, "Let go of me, I have to go to work." I know. Ling Jing let go and took a step back. He didn't hug her again, but looked at her with a passionate gaze. Peijian, will I see you again? Su Peijian didn't know how to respond to this. She took out a set of her own clothes from the wardrobe and put them on without avoiding Ling Jing. Peision? Su Peision didn't move. In fact, Ling Jing rarely called her by her name. In the past, he always liked women to call her by their names. Sometimes she would be unhappy, but now she realized that it was right that he didn't call her that way. Because she didn't know how long she could hold on when he called her name in such a low voice. After putting on her clothes, she turned to face Ling Jing. He was still naked, standing there, looking at her pitifully. He looked like an abandoned animal. Once again, she felt guilty, but she suppressed the emotion. Ling Jing. She looked at him very seriously and gave him a serious suggestion. If you want to become better, you shouldn't do it for me, but for yourself. Ling Jing. You're still young. You'll meet other women in the future. You might find that I'm really not suitable for you. I won't. Ling Jing shook his head, eager to prove himself. He went forward and held her hand. I swear, I'll never meet another woman like you in my life. Really? As he spoke, the grievance on his face grew stronger. Look, I used the money to buy a house for you. I also listened to you and seriously looked for a job. Really? Peision, believe me, I can change. I can change. Believe me. Su Peision pulled her hand out for the last time. Okay, I'm going to work. Peision, he called out pitifully. Su Peision closed her eyes and left without looking back. When she went downstairs, every step of her high heels on the steps was like a light hammer, knocking on her heart. In the office, Lin Feixing looked at Su Peision, who was sitting opposite him, and handed a document to her. Take a look at this. If there's no problem, do it like this? Okay. Su Peision took the document and flipped it open. She was very focused when she read the document. It was as if nothing in this world could enter her eyes. Lin Feixing admired Su Peision's delicate side profile, feeling as if he had found a treasure. There were many beautiful women, and there were also many women with personalities. However, there were not many women who were beautiful and had personalities. Not to mention, Su Peision had a kind of calmness that women of her age did not have. That might have something to do with her experience. Ordinary people might find it disgusting, but he felt that Su Peision was very good. Sensing his gaze, Su Peision looked up at him, a little confused. Why are you staring at me like that? You're beautiful. After saying these 3 words, Lin Feixing laughed first. When I read Luotian Fu, I thought Qiao Ji was too exaggerated. How could there be such a beautiful woman in the world? But now, when I look at you, I think you're slender and beautiful. Red lips on the outside, white teeth on the inside. Bright eyes and kind eyes, these words are really appropriate. Su Peision put down the document in her hand and smiled slightly. I thought that as a returnee, you should have forgotten Chinese culture. How is that possible? Lin Feixing laughed. My mother held me in her arms when I was 3 years old and taught me to read Tang poems. Although my parents let me study abroad, they taught me Chinese culture since I was a child. They said that one should not forget one's roots. If one can't even learn our own culture, what's the use of learning foreign culture? That makes sense. Su Peision nodded. In some ways, she did admire Lin Feixing. At first glance, he looked like a businessman, or if she spent more time with him, she would discover the advantages of him. However, that was all. There was only appreciation for a collaborator. There was nothing else. She sighed in her heart and pushed the document back to Ling Jing. That's it. The people in your company have considered all aspects. I think there's no problem. It's not just the people in my company. You have a part in it too. Lin Feixing smiled brightly. I didn't know that although you stay in Rome City, you can analyze the international situation and the environment in England so clearly. If I didn't know better, I would think that you've been in England for a long time. I've been to England many times. As for these situations, I can actually predict their future by reading some social news. Every small detail can affect the overall situation. So, you're still more capable. After Lin Feixing finished speaking, he looked at the time. It's getting late. Let's have dinner together. Sure. Su Peijian didn't refuse. She stood up and followed Lin Feixing out of the office. They went downstairs. Just as she was about to get into Lin Feixing's car, she saw from the corner of her eye a Cadillac that looked exactly like Lin Feixing's. She was stunned and stopped in her tracks. What's wrong? Lin Feixing walked forward and saw the car. He smiled. It seems that my friend was right. This car is indeed very cost-effective. Su Peijian didn't respond. She watched as Lin Feixing opened the door for her. She got into the car. The moment Lin Feixing closed the door, she turned to look across the road. The window of the Cadillac across the road had been rolled down. Ling Jing's face appeared behind the window. He looked at her with a sad expression. That man had the capital to be a demon, but he still had to show such an expression. Su Peijian's heart skipped a beat. She forced herself to look away and smiled at Lin Feixing, who had just gotten into the car. The car started and moved forward. Su Peijian saw from the rearview mirror that Ling Jing's car was also following hers. She clenched her fists tightly. Lin Feixing happened to be talking to her. She forced herself to ignore him. However, no matter how she reminded herself, she couldn't help but look behind her. That car occasionally couldn't keep up, but it soon caught up again. Su Peijian looked at Ling Jing and suddenly felt a little annoyed. What did Ling Jing mean? Did he want to take her in this way? She wouldn't. She would never be soft-hearted, nor would she be easily tempted. She and Ling Jing were not suitable for each other. How about eating Hunan cuisine? Can you eat spicy food? If not, shall we eat Japanese food? Okay. Su Peijian came back to her senses and answered absent-mindedly, Hunan cuisine is fine. I know a good Hunan restaurant. Let's go. Su Peijian didn't object. The moment she turned around, she found that Ling Jing's car had disappeared. She breathed a sigh of relief. However, when they arrived at the restaurant, she saw that car appear again. She didn't want Lin Feixing to suspect her, so she chose to look away. She entered the restaurant and chose a seat by the window. Lin Feixing asked her what she wanted to eat in a gentlemanly manner. She was about to answer when she saw Ling Jing's car appear again and stop across the road. She casually clicked on the picture on the menu and gritted her teeth. She didn't understand what Ling Jing wanted to do. Her phone rang. It was a text message notification. Lin Feixing was still ordering. Su Peijian didn't want to pay attention to him, but the text message rang again. Lin Feixing looked up at her. She had no choice but to take out her phone. Don't be with that pretty boy. Pretty boy? Who? Lin Feixing? How could he be so shameless? He was a pretty boy himself, okay? Before Su Peijian could react, she saw the second message. That pretty boy is not suitable for you. Su Peijian gritted her teeth. Before she could reply, Ling Jing sent her a second message. It's true. You can tell just by looking at his appearance. He's good-looking but useless. Can he satisfy you? Absolutely not. Bastard. Su Peijian was so angry that her face turned red. If it weren't for Lin Feixing the waiter, she had no doubt that she would go out and beat Ling Jing up. After 2 beeps, another message came. You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.